The message came at midnight. 3 words that turned Serena Vale's world to ash. She's having his baby. In the penthouse overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline, the wife of the city's most feared crime boss stared at the photo of another woman's ultrasound. Dominic Rourke had built an empire on loyalty, demanded it from everyone who worked for him, killed for it. But he'd given Serena something far more dangerous than betrayal. He'd given her a reason to burn everything down. If you want to see how a queen destroys a king without lifting a blade, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The crystal tumbler slipped from Serena's fingers, shattering against the marble floor of the penthouse. She didn't move to clean it up, didn't flinch at the sound. Her eyes remained fixed on the phone screen, on the image that had just redefined her entire existence. An ultrasound. 20 weeks. A girl. The sender was anonymous, but the photo wasn't. She could see Dominic's watch in the corner of the frame, the Patek Philippe she'd given him for their 5th anniversary. His hand was resting on someone else's swollen belly, his wedding ring catching the fluorescent light of what looked like a private medical office. Serena Vale had been raised in this world. Her father had run the South Side before Dominic consolidated power, before the merger that was supposed to unite 2 empires into one unstoppable force. She knew the rules. Mistresses were expected, almost traditional. But children? Children outside the marriage were complications, liabilities. They created succession problems, divided loyalties, weakened the foundation of everything. And Dominic knew that better than anyone. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a location pin. A house in Kenilworth, one of the North Shore's most exclusive neighborhoods. The kind of place you didn't stumble into. The kind of place you built deliberately. The kind of place you built for a second family. Serena walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, her bare feet silent against the imported Italian tile. Chicago spread out beneath her like a kingdom made of light and shadow. Somewhere down there, in one of those buildings, Dominic was conducting business, making decisions, playing the role of the untouchable crime lord who answered to no one. She almost laughed. The elevator chimed. His footsteps echoed through the foyer, confident, unhurried. Dominic Rourke walked into rooms like he owned them, because usually he did. 6'3", broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that could shift from charming to terrifying in a heartbeat. He'd built his reputation on being 3 steps ahead of everyone else, on reading people before they knew what they were thinking. But he hadn't read her. Not this time. "You're up late," he said, loosening his tie as he crossed to the bar. He didn't seem to notice the broken glass. Couldn't sleep? Serena turned from the window, her face carefully neutral. She'd learned young how to hide what she was feeling, how to present the mask the situation required. It was a survival skill in their world. The women who showed their cards too early didn't last long. "Just thinking," she said. Her voice was steady, almost bored. Dominic poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, the same expensive single malt he drank every night. "About?" "Legacy." He glanced at her over his shoulder, one eyebrow raised. "That's a heavy topic for 1 in the morning." "Is it?" She moved toward him, her silk robe whispering against her skin. "I was thinking about what we leave behind, what makes a life matter." He studied her for a moment, and she could see him trying to figure out the angle. Dominic didn't believe in casual conversation, especially not from her. Every word was a chess move, every silence a strategy. "This about kids again?" he asked, his tone careful. Serena smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. "No, I've made peace with that." It wasn't a lie. They'd tried for 3 years before she'd finally accepted the truth her doctors had confirmed. She couldn't carry a pregnancy. The endometriosis had done too much damage. They'd discussed surrogacy, adoption, even fostering. But Dominic had always found a reason to delay, to postpone, to wait for the right time. Now she knew why. "Good," he said, taking a drink. "Because things are complicated right now. The Bratva are pushing back on the harbor deal, and Marco's nephew is making noise about wanting a bigger cut of the casino action. I need to focus." "Of course," Serena said. "Focus on what matters." She watched him drain his glass, watched him set it down with the precise movements of a man who was always in control. He thought he was managing her, keeping her placated with vague promises and casual affection. He thought she was the same woman he'd married 7 years ago, the 23-year-old daughter of a dying empire, grateful to be elevated to queen of a bigger kingdom. He had no idea who she'd become. "I'm going to bed," Dominic said, already heading toward the primary suite. "Don't stay up too late." Serena waited until she heard the shower running before she moved. Then she picked up her phone and pulled up the anonymous messages again. There were more now. Photos of the house in Kenilworth, a sprawling Tudor-style estate with a circular driveway and professionally landscaped grounds. Interior shots of a nursery being decorated in soft pinks and creams. A custom crib that cost more than some people's cars. And then the woman. Lila Hart, 26, a paralegal at one of the law firms Dominic used to launder money through property transfers. Blonde, conventionally pretty in the way that seemed almost deliberate. The kind of woman who probably thought she'd won some kind of lottery. Serena had never felt sorry for a mistress before. She didn't start now. She spent the next 4 hours on her laptop, tracking down every detail she could find. Property records showed the Kenilworth house had been purchased 8 months ago through a shell company. The account that paid the utilities was one Serena didn't recognize, which meant Dominic had set up a completely separate financial structure. He'd hidden millions of dollars from their shared empire to build this second life. That was the part that cut deeper than the betrayal itself. Not that he'd slept with someone else, that was almost expected in their world, but that he'd stolen from their operation to do it. That he'd siphoned off resources they'd built together, used her connections and her father's legacy to consolidate power, then treated it all like his personal bank account. By the time the sun started rising over Lake Michigan, Serena had a complete picture. Bank statements, property deeds, medical records from Lila's obstetrician, text messages between Dominic and his mistress that someone, her anonymous informant, had managed to pull from the cloud. The messages were what made her decision final. "She doesn't understand me like you do. This is just for appearances. You're the one I want. When the baby comes, everything will be different." Standard lines. The same tired phrases men had been using to justify their betrayals since language began. But there was one message, sent 3 weeks ago, that made Serena's blood run cold. "Once I solidify the council vote, I won't need her family's connections anymore. We can be more open." He was planning to cut her out, to use her to secure his position, then discard her like she was nothing. Like the 7 years they'd spent building this empire together meant nothing. Like she was just another asset to be liquidated when she'd outlived her usefulness. Serena closed her laptop and walked back to the windows. The city was waking up now, morning traffic starting to clog the streets below. Normal people heading to normal jobs, living normal lives where the worst thing they had to worry about was being late to a meeting or forgetting to pick up milk. She'd never wanted a normal life. She'd been raised for this. Trained from childhood to understand power dynamics, to read situations, to know when to speak and when to be silent. Her father had groomed her to be the power behind the throne, the strategic mind that turned ambition into empire. But Dominic had made a mistake. He'd assumed that being the power behind the throne was all she could ever be, that she'd be content to let him wear the crown while she worked in the shadows. He was about to learn the difference between a queen consort and a queen in her own right. The shower shut off. Serena heard Dominic moving around the bedroom, getting dressed for another day of playing king. She slipped her phone into her robe pocket and composed her face into the expression he expected. Pleasant, supportive, undemanding. When he emerged, she was sitting at the breakfast table their housekeeper had set, sipping coffee and reading the Tribune like this was any other morning. "Sleep well?" she asked. "Well enough?" He grabbed a piece of toast, already distracted by something on his phone. "I've got meetings all day. Don't wait up tonight. This thing with the Bratva might run late." "Of course," Serena said. "Actually, I was thinking about going to that charity gala on Saturday, the one for the children's hospital." Dominic looked up, surprised. Serena usually avoided the high society events unless she absolutely had to attend. She found them tedious, full of people performing wealth instead of actually wielding power. "You hate those things," he said. "I know, but I've been isolated lately. It might be good to remind people we're still a united front." She met his eyes. "Especially with all the territorial disputes going on. Show of strength and all that." She could see him processing it, could watch the gears turning as he tried to figure out if there was some angle he was missing. But the logic was sound. In their world, appearances mattered. A powerful couple projected stability, discouraged challenges. made rivals think twice before testing boundaries. Fine, he said finally. I'll have Marcus arrange security. Marcus Chen was Dominic's head of security, a former Marine who'd saved Dominic's life in a warehouse shootout 5 years ago. He was competent, professional, and completely loyal to Dominic, which meant Serena would have to be careful. Thank you, she said, returning to her newspaper. Dominic left 20 minutes later, flanked by his usual security detail. Serena watched from the window as the convoy of black SUVs pulled away from the building, heading toward wherever he conducted his actual business. He kept her carefully separate from the violent parts of his empire, never let her see the blood on his hands. Another mistake. She made 3 calls that morning. The first was to her father's former accountant, Arthur Reeves, who'd retired to a golf community in Arizona but still kept his finger on the pulse of Chicago's financial underworld. Arthur had taught her how to read balance sheets before she'd learned algebra, had shown her how money moved through shell companies and offshore accounts like water flowing downhill. "Serena," Arthur said, his voice warm, "it's been too long. How's retirement treating you?" That was his idea of a joke. Everyone knew crime bosses' wives didn't retire. "I need information," she said, quietly. "Always straight to business. What are we looking for?" "Accounts I don't know about. Money moving through structures I don't recognize." She paused. "I think Dominic has been building something separate." Arthur was silent for a long moment. "That's a serious accusation." "I know." "You have proof?" "Enough to ask questions, not enough to act." "Send me what you have. Give me 48 hours. The second call was to her cousin Elena, who worked for the FBI's Organized Crime Division. They'd grown up together, had stayed close even as their lives diverged. Serena into the criminal empire, Elena into the law enforcement trying to dismantle it. It was an unusual relationship, but it worked because they both understood the value of information. "Please tell me you're finally ready to testify," Elena said when she answered. "You know better than that." "A girl can hope." There was the sound of a door closing, then Elena's voice dropped. "What do you need?" "Background on someone." "Lila Hart, 26, works at Whitfield and Associates downtown." "The law firm?" "Serena, if you're looking into one of Dominic's money laundering operations..." "I'm not. This is personal." Elena understood what that meant. "I'll see what I can find. But if this goes sideways, I can't protect you." "I'm not asking you to." The third call was the most dangerous. Serena scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't dialed in almost 3 years. Viktor Kozlov. He was Bratva, second in command to the Russian mob's operations in Chicago. He was also someone who'd made it very clear at multiple events and meetings that he thought Dominic was overextended and vulnerable. "Mrs. Rourke," Victor said when he answered. His accent was thick, his tone amused. "This is unexpected." "I have a proposition," Serena said, "but it requires discretion." "Discretion is expensive. I'm aware. Are you interested?" "Depends on the proposition." Serena walked to the window, looked out at the city that had been her cage for 7 years. "What would you say if I told you Dominic is about to make a very stupid decision, one that could destabilize his entire operation?" Victor laughed. "I would say I am very interested in hearing more." "Not over the phone. Next Tuesday, the Art Institute, 2 o'clock. Come alone." "Bold," Victor said. "Meeting with me could be seen as betrayal." "Only if anyone finds out." She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline, not fear. She was crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But that was fine. Dominic had crossed it first. The rest of the week passed in careful normalcy. Serena played the role she'd perfected over 7 years. The supportive wife, the gracious hostess, the woman who ran their legitimate charitable foundation and smiled at fundraisers. She attended a board meeting for one of their front companies, had lunch with the wives of Dominic's lieutenants, approved the caterer for an upcoming event. And every night, after Dominic fell asleep, she worked. Arthur sent his report on Thursday. It was worse than she'd thought. Dominic had been siphoning money for almost 2 years, long before Lila got pregnant. He'd set up an entire parallel financial structure, accounts in the Caymans, property holdings in 3 states, investment portfolios she'd never heard of. He'd stolen close to $40 million from their operation. $40 million that should have been reinvested in their territories, used to pay off officials and grease the wheels that kept their empire running smoothly. $40 million that represented hundreds of hours of her work, her negotiations, her strategic planning. Elena's report came Friday morning. Lila Hart was exactly what she appeared to be, a mid-level paralegal with student loans and a modest apartment in Wicker Park. At least that had been her life until 8 months ago. Now she lived in Kenilworth, drove a Mercedes, and wore jewelry that cost more than her annual salary. But there was something else. Lila's father had died in a construction accident 15 years ago. The company responsible had been a subsidiary of a larger firm, one that, according to Elena's notes, had eventually been acquired by a holding company in Dominic's portfolio. Serena stared at that detail for a long time. Had Dominic sought Lila out? Had he seen her as some kind of redemption project? A way to make amends for something his business had indirectly caused? Or was it just coincidence, the kind of cosmic joke the universe liked to play? It didn't matter. The outcome was the same. Saturday arrived. Serena spent 3 hours getting ready for the gala, working with her stylist to create an image that would send exactly the right message. She chose a floor-length gown in deep crimson, bold, commanding, impossible to ignore. Jewelry was kept simple. Diamond earrings, her wedding ring, nothing else. Hair swept back in a severe chignon that showed off her bone structure. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a crime boss's wife. She saw something more dangerous. Dominic was in his study when she came downstairs. He looked up from his laptop, and something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. She'd stopped dressing like this for him years ago, had defaulted to elegant neutrals that let her blend into the background. "You look stunning," he said. "Thank you." She picked up her clutch. "Are you ready?" The gala was being held at the Drake Hotel, one of Chicago's oldest and most prestigious venues. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite, politicians, business leaders, socialites, and the handful of criminals wealthy enough to buy their way into legitimacy. Serena recognized most of them, had attended dozens of events just like this one, but tonight felt different. Tonight she was hunting. She spotted Lila almost immediately. The girl was wearing a soft pink dress that showed off her pregnancy, her blonde hair falling in loose curls around her shoulders. She stood near the bar, alone, looking uncomfortable in the way people do when they're out of their depth. "Excuse me," Serena said to the mayor's wife, who'd been droning on about some charity project. "I need to powder my nose." She crossed the ballroom slowly, letting people stop her, engaging in brief conversations that kept her moving in Lila's direction. When she finally reached the bar, she stood close enough to be noticed, but not so close it seemed deliberate. Lila glanced at her, then did a double-take. Recognition flooded her face, followed quickly by panic. "Sparkling water," Serena told the bartender. Then she turned to Lila with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I love your dress. Who's the designer?" I don't." Lila's hand went to her stomach protectively. "Excuse me." She tried to move away, but Serena stepped into her path. Not aggressively, just enough to make it awkward for her to leave without causing a scene. "We haven't been properly introduced," Serena said quietly. "I'm Serena Rourke. I believe you know my husband." The color drained from Lila's face. "Please, I don't want any trouble." "Neither do I. I just want to understand." Serena's voice was conversational, pleasant. Anyone watching would think they were having a friendly chat. "Did he tell you he loved you?" Lila's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I never meant—" "Did he tell you he loved you?" Serena repeated. "Yes." "Did he promise you a future? Tell you that once things settled down, you could be together openly?" Lila nodded, miserable. "He's lying," Serena said simply. "He's always lying. And when this baby is born, when you become a liability instead of a fantasy, he'll get rid of you, not violently. He's too smart for that, but he'll make you disappear just the same." "You don't know him like I do," Lila whispered, but there was no conviction in it. Serena laughed softly. "Oh, sweetheart, I know exactly who he is. I've known for 7 years. The question is, do you know who you are? Because right now, you're just a problem he hasn't solved yet." She walked away before Lila could respond, melting back into the crowd. Her heart was pounding, but her hands were steady. She'd gotten what she needed, confirmation that this wasn't just an affair. Dominic had made promises, built a narrative, created expectations he'd never intended to fulfill. He'd given Lila hope. That was his real cruelty. Across the ballroom, she spotted Dominic talking to one of the aldermen, working his charm, building alliances. He caught her eye and smiled, raising his glass in a subtle toast. "Look at us," his expression said. "The perfect power couple." Serena smiled back and raised her sparkling water. 2 days later, she met Victor at the Art Institute. They stood in front of a Monet, pretending to admire the water lilies while they talked in low voices. "Dominic has a mistress," Serena said without preamble. "She's pregnant. He's been stealing from our operation to support her." Victor's expression didn't change, but she could see the calculation in his eyes. "You have proof?" "Bank statements, property records, messages, everything. And you're telling me this because? Because when this comes out, and it will come out, there's going to be chaos. The council will question his judgment. His lieutenants will smell weakness. The territories will destabilize." She paused. "Unless someone is ready to step in. Someone who can offer stability." "You're talking about a coup." "I'm talking about succession planning." Victor studied her for a long moment. "What do you want?" "Time. When I move, I need 48 hours before the Bratva makes any territorial plays. Give me that, and I'll give you the north side warehouses Dominic's been blocking you from." It was a gamble. The north side warehouses were worth millions, but they were also leverage. Once she gave them up, she'd have nothing to offer the Bratva in future negotiations, but she wouldn't need to negotiate. Not after this. 48 hours, Victor said. "But if you fail, I won't." She left the museum and went straight to a storage facility in Cicero, one her father had owned before he died. Inside Unit 237, she found what she was looking for. A gun safe containing 20 years of financial records, recorded conversations, and blackmail material her father had accumulated. Insurance policies against every major player in Chicago's underworld, including several recordings of Dominic discussing murders he'd ordered, bribes he'd paid, and deals he'd made with corrupt officials. Her father had always told her that information was the real currency of their world. Money came and went, territories shifted, alliances reformed. But secrets? Secrets were forever. Serena spent a week organizing everything, building her case like a prosecutor preparing for trial. She created dossiers for every member of the council, the 5 crime bosses who officially governed Chicago's underworld, maintained the territories, and settled disputes before they became wars. Each dossier contained the same information: proof of Dominic's affair, documentation of the money he'd stolen, evidence that he'd been planning to consolidate more power by eliminating her family's connections from the equation. But she didn't send them yet. First, she needed one more piece to fall into place. She found Marcus Chen at his usual coffee shop, the one near Dominic's main office. He was reading the sports section, looking relaxed in a way he never did around Dominic. "Mrs. Rourke," he said when she sat down across from him. "This is unexpected. Walk with me." They left the coffee shop and headed toward Millennium Park. It was a cold November morning, and the park was mostly empty except for a few determined joggers. "How long have you known about Lila?" Serena asked. Marcus didn't insult her by pretending confusion. "About 6 months, since he assigned me to set up security at the Kenilworth house." "And you didn't think I should know?" "Not my place to get involved in personal matters." Serena stopped walking and turned to face him. "What if I told you Dominic is planning to restructure the organization, that he's going to phase out half the old guard, including several people who've been loyal to him since the beginning?" Marcus's expression shifted slightly. "I'd say that sounds like bad business." "It is, because those people won't go quietly, and when they push back, there's going to be blood." She paused. "Your blood, probably. You're head of security. When things go sideways, you're the one who'll be standing between Dominic and the people who want him dead." "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I just want you to understand that loyalty is a two-way street. And when someone stops being loyal to you, you don't owe them anything anymore." She walked away, leaving him to process that. Marcus was smart enough to read between the lines, to understand that she was offering him an out before everything collapsed. 3 days later, she got a text from an unknown number. "I'm listening?" Serena smiled. The next council meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Dominic was planning to propose an expansion into territory currently controlled by the Irish mob, a move that would require significant resources, and unanimous council support. He'd been working the phones for weeks, building consensus, calling in favors. He thought he had the votes locked. Monday night, Serena invited him to dinner at home. She cooked, something she rarely did anymore, making his favorite meal of steak and roasted vegetables. She opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving, lit candles, created an atmosphere of intimacy they hadn't had in months. "What's the occasion?" Dominic asked, clearly suspicious. "Does there need to be an occasion for me to cook dinner for my husband?" He relaxed slightly. "I suppose not. It's just been a while." They ate slowly, talking about meaningless things, the weather, renovations she was considering for the penthouse, his upcoming trip to New York, surface conversation that required no real thought or emotion. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Dominic poured himself a scotch while Serena curled up on the couch with tea. "How are you feeling about tomorrow's meeting?" she asked. "Confident I've got the votes?" "All 5? "All 5. Serena nodded slowly. "And after? Once you have the Irish territory, what's next?" Dominic settled into his chair, pleased to talk strategy. This was the dance they'd perfected over the years, her asking questions that made him feel smart, him explaining his plans while she appeared to admire his brilliance. Except tonight, she was listening for something different. "I'm going to consolidate," he said. "We've been too spread out, too dependent on old alliances that don't serve us anymore. Once we have the Irish territory, we'll have enough leverage to renegotiate terms with some of our partners." "Which partners?" "The Italians, for one, and maybe some of the operations on the south side." He sipped his scotch. "Your father's old territory." There it was, the confirmation she'd needed. "That makes sense," Serena said calmly. "Consolidation is smart, though I imagine some people won't be happy about it." "People are never happy about change, but they'll adjust." He looked at her. "You understand, don't you? This is about building something that lasts." "Of course," Serena said. "Legacy." That night, after Dominic fell asleep, Serena sent the dossiers. She used a service her father had set up years ago, one that routed communications through so many servers and proxies that tracing them was nearly impossible. Each council member received their packet at exactly 3 a.m., late enough that they'd be asleep, early enough that they'd see it first thing in the morning before Dominic could get to them. Then she waited. Her phone started ringing at 7 a.m. She ignored it. By 8 a.m., she had 17 missed calls from various numbers. At 8:30, Dominic's phone started buzzing. She listened from the bathroom as he answered, his voice heavy with sleep. "What? Slow down. What report?" A pause. "I don't know what you're talking about." His voice sharpened. "Who sent it?" Serena emerged from the bathroom, toweling her hair dry. Dominic was sitting on the edge of the bed, his face ashen. "What's wrong?" she asked innocently. "Someone sent the council members a report about—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider. "About some personal matters. It's causing problems." "What kind of personal matters?" He looked at her, and she saw the moment he started to suspect. But he couldn't prove anything, couldn't even accuse her without admitting what he'd done. "I need to go," he said, already reaching for his clothes. "The meeting. We have to postpone." "Is there anything I can do to help?" "No, just—" He pulled on his shirt. "Stay here. I'll handle this." He left in a rush, security team scrambling to keep up. Serena watched from the window as the convoy pulled away, heading toward whatever disaster awaited him. Then she got dressed and went to her own meeting. Arthur was waiting at his lawyer's office, surrounded by documents. "I've prepared everything you asked for," he said. "But Serena, once you file these papers, there's no going back." "I know." The documents were power of attorney transfers, corporate restructuring filings, and formal requests to audit every shared account and holding company. They represented a complete financial separation, one that would be nearly impossible for Dominic to block, given that she'd structured everything through her father's original trusts. "These will take effect immediately," Arthur said. "Within 48 hours, you'll have full control of your father's legacy operations. Dominic won't be able to touch them. And our shared holdings? Frozen pending the audit. He won't be able to move money, make deals, or access the accounts without your signature." Serena signed everything. Each signature felt like a nail in a coffin. The council meeting happened anyway, but an emergency session rather than the planned strategy discussion. Serena wasn't invited wives rarely were, but she had sources who reported back. Dominic tried to deny everything, tried to frame it as a personal matter that had nothing to do with business. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the questions it raised were impossible to ignore. If he'd hidden this, what else had he hidden? If he'd stolen from the general fund, could the council trust their own accounts were secure? And then there was the strategic question. Why would he build a completely separate financial structure unless he was planning to break away from the council? Unless he was preparing for something bigger? The meeting ended without a vote on the Irish territory expansion. Dominic was ordered to appear before the full council in 1 week to address the accusations formally. He came home that night looking 10 years older. "They're calling it a tribunal," he said, pouring himself a drink with shaking hands. "A formal investigation." "Into what?" Serena asked, though she knew. "Everything. My finances, my decision-making, my loyalty to the council." He drained the glass and poured another. "Someone is trying to destroy me." "Who would do that?" He laughed bitterly. "Take your pick. The Irish, the Italians, the Bratva. Hell, half the council has been looking for an excuse to take me down." "What are you going to do?" Dominic looked at her, and she saw genuine fear in his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. "I'm going to fix it. I have to." Over the next week, she watched him spiral. He worked 18-hour days, called in every favor he was owed, made promises he couldn't possibly keep. He tried to buy his way out of the disaster, throwing money at problems that money couldn't solve. And through it all, Serena played the supportive wife. She brought him meals when he forgot to eat, sat with him while he made phone calls, offered sympathy without judgment. She was the eye of the hurricane, calm and still while everything around her tore itself apart. On Friday, 3 days before the tribunal, Lila called the penthouse. Serena answered. "Mrs. Rourke, I need to speak with Dominic. He's not answering his phone, and he's busy. Please. The baby, I'm having contractions, and the doctor said." "Go to the hospital," Serena said calmly. "I'm sure Dominic will meet you there when he can." She hung up and deleted the call from the phone's history. Then she went to Dominic's study, where he was reviewing financial statements with his lawyer. "Lila's in labor," she said. Dominic's head snapped up. "What?" "She called. She's having contractions. I told her to go to the hospital." He stared at her, trying to process this information, trying to figure out how to handle two crises at once. "I need to No," Serena said quietly. "You need to decide what's more important, saving your empire or being there for your mistress and your illegitimate child." The lawyer suddenly became very interested in his papers. "Serena," Dominic said carefully, "I know this is complicated. It's not complicated at all. You built a second life while pretending to build one with me. You stole money from our operation to pay for it, and now you need to choose which life you actually want." "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." She walked to his desk, placed both hands on it, and leaned in. "Choose the empire, Dominic. Tell her to handle it herself. Prove to the council that you can still make hard decisions." He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him doing the math, weighing his options. The tribunal was in 3 days. If he went to Lila now, it would confirm everything the council suspected. It would prove he'd let personal matters compromise his judgment. But if he stayed, if he put the empire first— "Call her," Serena said. "Tell her you can't be there. Tell her whatever you need to tell her, but end it, now. Tonight, before the tribunal." Dominic picked up his phone with trembling hands. Serena listened as he made the call, listened as he told Lila that he couldn't leave, that she needed to understand how important this meeting was, that he'd make it up to her later. Listened as Lila's voice rose in panic, then anger, then something that sounded like heartbreak. And listened as Dominic eventually hung up, cutting her off mid-sentence. "There," he said hollowly. "Are you happy?" "No," Serena said honestly. "But I'm satisfied." She left him in his study and went to the kitchen to make tea. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. She just forced him to choose, and he'd chosen exactly what she'd known he would. Because Dominic Rourke loved power more than he could ever love a person, and that was going to destroy him. The baby was born at 2:47 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Serena knew because the hospital called the penthouse looking for Dominic, who was passed out drunk in his study after spending 6 hours on the phone trying to shore up council votes that were never coming. She stood in the doorway watching him sleep, his head on the desk, an empty bottle of Macallan beside him. 7 years ago, she would have woken him gently, helped him to bed, pretended not to notice the weakness. Now she just stared at him with the same detached curiosity she'd give a laboratory specimen. "Mr. Rourke has a daughter," the nurse had said on the phone, her voice bright with the kind of joy reserved for people who didn't know what world they were calling into. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Mother and baby are doing well. Serena had thanked her and hung up without waking him. Let him find out on his own time. Let him realize, slowly and painfully, that he'd missed the birth of his first child because he'd been too busy trying to save himself from the consequences of his own stupidity. She went back to bed and slept better than she had in months. Sunday morning, Dominic emerged from his study looking like something dragged behind a truck. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled, and when he reached for his phone, his hand shook badly enough that he nearly dropped it. "Christ," he muttered, scrolling through 17 missed calls and twice as many texts. Then he stopped, his face going pale. "She had the baby." "I know," Serena said from the kitchen, where she was making coffee. "The hospital called last night." "And you didn't wake me?" "You were indisposed." She poured 2 cups, brought one to him. "Congratulations, I hear it's a girl." Dominic stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. You knew, and you just what? Let you sleep? Yes." She sat down across from him. "You made your choice Friday night when you told her you couldn't be there. Following through on that choice seemed like the logical next step." This is different. This is my daughter." "Is it?" Serena tilted her head. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like another complication you're not equipped to handle. Another problem that's going to require time and attention and resources you don't have. You're talking about a child. I'm talking about reality." She took a sip of coffee. "The tribunal is in 2 days. You're bleeding allies by the hour. Marcus Chen called 3 times yesterday. Apparently someone's been spreading rumors that you're planning to replace half your security team with people who have no loyalty to anyone but you. The Irish are making moves on the south side, and Viktor Kozlov was seen having lunch with Tommy Chen from the council." Dominic's jaw tightened. "How do you know all this?" "Because I pay attention. Because while you've been spiraling, I've been listening, watching, learning exactly how much damage you've done." She set down her cup. "So yes, you have a daughter, and you need to decide if you're going to be the kind of man who abandons her to save himself, or the kind who loses everything trying to be in 2 places at once. That's not fair." "No," Serena agreed, "it's not. But fairness stopped being relevant the moment you decided to build a second life behind my back." He left an hour later, heading to the hospital. Serena watched him go, then made a call to Elena. "I need you to do something," she said when her cousin answered. "And I need you to not ask questions." "That's never a good sign." "There's a woman named Lila Hart at Northwestern Hospital. She just had a baby, Dominic's baby." Serena paused. "I need to know if anyone's been asking about her, watching her, if there's been any unusual activity." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Serena, if you're thinking about... I'm not thinking about anything. I just need to know if she's safe." "Why do you care if she's safe?" "Because if something happens to her or that baby, Dominic becomes sympathetic. He becomes the victim instead of the villain. And I need him to stay the villain." "Jesus," Elena breathed. "You're really doing this." "I'm protecting what's mine. There's a difference." Elena agreed to look into it, though Serena could hear the concern in her voice. They'd always been honest with each other about the line between family loyalty and law enforcement, but this was pushing it into new territory. Serena spent the rest of Sunday preparing. She laid out every document, every recording, every piece of evidence she'd compiled. Then she organized it into a presentation that would take exactly 20 minutes to deliver, long enough to be thorough, short enough that the council wouldn't lose interest. At 3 p.m., Arthur called. "The audit's complete," he said. "You were right. Dominic's been diverting funds for almost 3 years, not 2. It's closer to 60 million, not 40. Serena closed her eyes. 60 million. That was nearly a third of their total liquid assets. Money that could have been used to expand operations, buy protection, invest in legitimate businesses that would have given them cover. Instead, Dominic had burned it on a fantasy life with a woman half his age. "Can you prove it came from our shared operations?" she asked. Every dollar. I've traced it back through shell companies, offshore accounts, the works. It's all documented. Send everything to me, encrypted. Serena, Arthur said carefully. Once you present this to the council, they're going to ask what you want. You need to have an answer ready. I know what I want. Do you? Because what you're describing isn't a divorce or a separation. It's a complete dismantling of his power base. It's exactly what he deserves, Serena finished. Send me the files, Arthur. She hung up and turned to find Marcus Chen standing in her living room. She'd given him a key 2 days ago, told him he could come and go as needed. He'd chosen to use it now, when Dominic was gone. We need to talk, Marcus said. About? About what happens after the tribunal. About who runs security when this all shakes out. He moved to the window, looking out at the city. Dominic's been making calls, trying to consolidate loyalty. He's offering promotions, bigger cuts, all the usual promises. And nobody's buying it. Half the guys think he's lost his mind, and the other half think he's about to get them all killed. Marcus turned to face her, but they're scared. Because if Dominic goes down, they don't know what comes next. What comes next is stability, Serena said. What comes next is someone who actually understands how to run an organization without letting their ego destroy it. You. Me. Marcus studied her for a long moment. You know the council won't give you his seat. They've never had a woman at that table. Then they'll make an exception, because the alternative is watching their territories collapse into chaos while they scramble to fill the power vacuum. She walked toward him. I'm not asking for permission, Marcus. I'm telling you what's going to happen, and you can either be part of it or you can go down with him. What do you need from me? I need you to keep the security team neutral. No matter what Dominic promises them, no matter what threats he makes, I need them to stand down. Can you do that? For how long? 48 hours? After the tribunal, it won't matter anymore. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, but if this goes wrong, it won't. He left through the service entrance, the same way he'd come. Serena watched him go, then returned to her preparations. She was running on adrenaline and coffee, sleeping 3 hours a night, but she couldn't afford to slow down. Not now. Not when everything was finally falling into place. Dominic came home late that night, smelling like hospital antiseptic and something that might have been tears. He went straight to the bar and poured himself 4 fingers of scotch. She's perfect, he said quietly. Tiny. Red hair like her mother. 10 fingers, 10 toes. Perfect. Serena didn't respond. I held her, Dominic continued. Just for a few minutes before Lila's mother arrived and made me leave. But I held her and she... He stopped, his voice breaking. She wrapped her hand around my finger. Babies do that. It's a reflex. He turned to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed. Don't you feel anything, even a little bit? I feel a lot of things, Serena said. Anger, betrayal, satisfaction that your choices are finally catching up with you. But sympathy for you? No, I don't feel that at all. She's innocent in this. The baby didn't ask to be born into this mess. Neither did I ask to be married to a man who'd rather build a second family than face the one he already had. She stood up. But here we are. You made your choices, Dominic. Now you get to live with them. The tribunal is in 36 hours. I suggest you prepare. She went to bed, leaving him alone with his scotch and his guilt. Through the bedroom door, she could hear him moving around, making phone calls, his voice getting progressively more desperate as the night wore on. By Monday morning, the situation had deteriorated further. 2 of Dominic's key lieutenants had been arrested on weapons charges that Elena later confirmed had been orchestrated by officers on Viktor Kozlov's payroll. One of his legitimate businesses, a construction company he used to launder money, had been hit with a surprise inspection that found enough OSHA violations to shut it down indefinitely. And someone had leaked photos of Dominic leaving the hospital to the Chicago Tribune. The headline read, Alleged crime boss welcomes secret love child while empire crumbles. Serena read the article over breakfast while Dominic paced the penthouse like a caged animal. Who's doing this? He demanded. Who the hell is coordinating all of this? Does it matter? Serena turned the page. The damage is done. It matters because I need to know who to hit back against. He grabbed his phone. I'm calling Tommy. He owes me from that thing in Detroit. He'll help me figure out. Tommy's not going to help you. Dominic stopped. What? Tommy Chen. He's not going to help you because he's been meeting with Viktor Kozlov, which means he's already chosen a side and it's not yours. How do you know that? Serena set down the newspaper and looked at him directly. Because I've been paying attention. Because while you've been playing house with your mistress and your new baby, I've been watching our empire fall apart piece by piece. And I've been documenting every move, every betrayal, every person who's decided you're not worth backing anymore. Dominic's face went pale. What are you saying? I'm saying you're alone. Marcus won't take your calls. Your lieutenants are either under arrest or looking for new employment. The council members you thought were allies are suddenly unavailable for meetings. Even your lawyer stopped returning your messages yesterday. That's not... You're lying. Am I? Call them. Right now. Call every single person you think you can count on and see how many actually pick up. She stood up. Or save yourself the embarrassment and accept that you've already lost. I haven't lost anything, Dominic said, but there was no conviction in it. The tribunal is tomorrow. I'll explain everything. They'll understand that this was personal, that it doesn't affect my ability to... To what? Run an organization? You stole $60 million, Dominic. $60 million that belonged to all of us, and you burned it on a house and a woman and a life you could never actually have. You think the council is going to forgive that? 60? He looked genuinely shocked. No, it was maybe 30, 35 at most. It was 60. Arthur traced every dollar. Would you like to see the receipts? Dominic sat down heavily, the fight draining out of him. This is you. You're the one who's been... Yes, Serena said simply. This is me, finally doing what I should have done years ago. Why? If you're so unhappy, why not just leave? Why destroy everything? Because you were going to destroy me first. She picked up her coffee cup. I saw the messages, Dominic. The ones where you talked about cutting out my family's connections once you had the council vote, where you discussed making me irrelevant. So I decided to make you irrelevant first. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. I never meant... Those were just contingency plans. In case things didn't work out. In case I became a liability, you mean. In case I stopped being useful. She finished her coffee. The tribunal is at 3 p.m. tomorrow. I suggest you get your story straight, because you're not fighting an accusation anymore. You're fighting for survival. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation and positioning. Serena met with each council member privately, presenting her evidence, making her case. She didn't ask for Dominic's seat directly. That would have seemed too ambitious, too threatening. Instead, she positioned herself as the solution to a problem they all shared. I can stabilize the territories, she told Viktor Kozlov over coffee in a restaurant where no one would recognize them. I have the connections, the knowledge, the strategic mind. And unlike Dominic, I don't let personal feelings compromise business decisions. The others won't accept a woman at the table, Viktor said, though he sounded more curious than dismissive. They'll accept whoever keeps the peace and protects their interests. Gender is irrelevant when the alternative is chaos. She made similar arguments to Tommy Chen, to Marco Delgado, who ran the casino operations, to the others. Each conversation was carefully calibrated to their specific concerns, their individual ambitions. By the time the tribunal began, she'd laid groundwork with everyone who mattered. The meeting was held in a private dining room at a restaurant the council owned, one where they could talk freely without worrying about surveillance. Serena wasn't invited to attend. This was Dominic's hearing, his chance to defend himself. But she'd made sure her evidence would speak for her. She waited in the penthouse, watching the clock tick toward 3 p.m. At 3:15, her phone rang. It was Arthur. They're reviewing the financial documents now, he said. Dominic tried to claim the money was invested in legitimate expansion opportunities, but when they asked for proof, he couldn't produce anything. What's his defense? He's blaming you, saying you've orchestrated this whole thing out of jealousy over the affair, that you're manipulating the evidence to make him look bad. Serena smiled. And are they believing him? No, because the numbers don't lie, and you've got independent verification from multiple sources. Plus, the photos in the Tribune didn't help his credibility. Arthur paused. Serena, they're talking about removing him entirely. Not just sanctioning him or reducing his territory. Complete removal. Good. You understand what that means? If they vote to remove him, he becomes fair game. Anyone who wants to settle old scores, eliminate a rival, take his territory, they can move on him without council protection. I know. He could be dead within a week. That's not my concern. She stood up and walked to the window. He made his choices. Now he lives with the consequences. The tribunal lasted 4 hours. By 7 p.m., Dominic came home looking like he'd aged a decade. He didn't pour himself a drink this time. He just stood in the middle of the living room, staring at nothing. "They've suspended me," he said finally. 30 days to liquidate my personal holdings and transfer operational control to an interim administrator. He laughed, a broken sound. An interim administrator. They're treating me like a failed business. What did you expect? I expected loyalty. I expected them to remember everything I've done for this city, every war I prevented, every alliance I built. His voice rose. I made half of them. Tommy Chen was running a protection racket out of a dry cleaner when I brought him into the fold. Marco was drowning in debt before I gave him the casino operations. And this is how they repay me? They're repaying you exactly how you would have repaid them if the situation were reversed, Serena said. You taught them that loyalty only matters as long as you're winning. Well, you're not winning anymore. Dominic turned to her, and for the first time she saw genuine hatred in his eyes. You're enjoying this. I'm satisfied with it. There's a difference. What do you want? Really? Because if this is about the affair, if you want me to end things with Lila, it's too late for that. And it was never about her. It was about you treating our marriage, our partnership, our entire empire like it was your personal playground. It was about you making decisions that affected both of us without ever consulting me. It was about you stealing money we earned together to build a life with someone else. I can fix this, Dominic said desperately. Give me time. Let me restructure things, and I can fix all of it. No, Serena said quietly. You can't. Because the problem isn't the affair or the money or even the tribunal. The problem is you. It's always been you. She walked past him toward the bedroom, then stopped. You have 30 days to move out. I'm keeping the penthouse. It's in my name anyway. Serena, we're done, Dominic. We've been done for a long time. I'm just finally saying it out loud. She closed the bedroom door and locked it, listening to him pace on the other side. Eventually, she heard him leave, the elevator chiming as he descended to whatever life he had left. Serena changed into comfortable clothes and poured herself a glass of wine. Then she opened her laptop and began drafting the proposal she'd present to the council in 2 weeks. It was titled, Operational Restructuring and Strategic Succession Planning. MUS. The first line read, In light of recent events, it has become clear that new leadership is required to ensure organizational stability and continued prosperity. She worked through the night, refining every word, anticipating every objection. By dawn, she had a document that laid out exactly how she would run things differently, how she would prioritize sustainable growth over ego-driven expansion, how she would rebuild trust with their allies and eliminate the kind of reckless behavior that had nearly destroyed them. And most importantly, how she would do it all without making the same mistakes Dominic had. When the sun came up over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Serena finally allowed herself to feel something other than cold calculation. She felt hope. Not for reconciliation or forgiveness or any kind of happy ending with Dominic. That ship had sailed and sunk. But hope for what came next. For the empire she could build without him. For the legacy she would create on her own terms. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Security team is ready. Just say the word. Serena texted back, Stand by. The real work starts tomorrow. She took a shower, got dressed, and made herself breakfast. At 9 a.m., she had a meeting with the head of one of their legitimate businesses, a tech consulting firm that generated enough real profit to make an excellent cover for money laundering. At 11 a.m., she was having lunch with a city councilwoman who'd been on Dominic's payroll for years. And at 2 p.m., she was meeting with Victor Kozlov again. This time, they met at Navy Pier, walking among tourists and families enjoying the late fall weather. It was the kind of public place where no one would think to look for a meeting between criminals. The council is impressed, Victor said without preamble. Your proposal was thorough, professional. Several members said it was the most strategic thinking they'd seen in years. But you're still a woman trying to take a seat that's never been held by a woman. That's going to be a problem for some people. Let them have their problem. I'll solve it the same way I solve everything else, by being better than the alternative. Victor smiled. I like you, Serena. I've always liked you. You think like we do, but you're not afraid to innovate. He paused. I'm going to support your bid for Dominic's seat, so will Tommy. That gives you 2 votes out of 5. And the others? Marco is persuadable. He likes stability, and you represent that. The other 2? Victor shrugged. They're old school. They'll vote against you on principle. So I need Marco. You need Marco, which means you need to give him something he wants. Serena had anticipated this. The casino operations expand into the suburbs. We've been blocking development there because Dominic thought it would draw too much attention. But if we structure it carefully, through legitimate development companies, we could triple Marco's revenue within 18 months. And you'd support this? I'd propose it myself at the first meeting. Make it clear that I'm interested in growing everyone's territories, not just consolidating my own power. Victor nodded approvingly. Smart. Give them a reason to invest in your success. He stopped walking and turned to face her. But understand this. If you take Dominic's seat, you can't show weakness. Not ever. The moment they sense hesitation or doubt, they'll move on you the same way you moved on him. I understand. Do you? Because this isn't like managing from the shadows anymore. This is walking into rooms full of men who've killed people for less than what you're attempting. This is making decisions that will get people hurt or killed. This is what I was raised for, Serena interrupted. My father ran the South Side for 20 years. I grew up in this world. I know exactly what I'm signing up for. Victor studied her for a long moment, then smiled. Yes, I believe you do. They parted ways, and Serena returned to the penthouse to find Dominic packing. He'd moved through the space like a ghost, taking only what was his, leaving everything they'd bought together. She watched from the doorway as he loaded boxes into the elevator. Where will you go? She asked. Does it matter? Not really. I'm just curious. He looked at her with something that might have been sadness or might have been exhaustion. Lila's apartment, until I figure something else out. That's going to be cramped with a baby. Yeah, well, he picked up another box. We'll manage. Dominic. He stopped waiting. What you did, the affair, the stealing, all of it, I need you to know it wasn't the betrayal that broke us. It was the arrogance, the assumption that I'd just accept it, that I'd stay in my place and let you do whatever you wanted. I never thought you'd just accept it, Dominic said quietly. I thought you'd fight. I thought you'd yell and throw things and demand explanations. I thought you'd be... He trailed off. What? Predictable. I thought you'd be predictable. Serena smiled. I know. That was your first mistake. He left without another word. The elevator doors closed and she was alone in the penthouse for the first time in 7 years. The silence was profound, almost physical. She stood there for a moment, taking it in. Then she walked to Dominic's study and began removing every trace of him. Files went into boxes for storage, personal items into trash bags. Within 2 hours, the room looked like it had never been his at all. By the end of the week, she'd transformed it into her own office. New desk, new furniture, new everything. She set up 3 monitors, installed secure communication systems, and created a workspace that reflected who she was, not who she'd been pretending to be. The council vote was scheduled for the following Monday. Serena spent the intervening days making her case, solidifying support, and preparing for every possible objection. She met with Marco at his flagship casino, walking through her expansion plans, showing him projected revenue numbers that made his eyes light up. You really think we can pull this off without attracting federal attention? He asked. I know we can, because we're going to do it slowly, legitimately, through properly structured businesses that can withstand scrutiny. She showed him the development plans her team had prepared. 5 years from now, you'll have operations in 4 suburbs, all completely legal, all generating legitimate profit that we can use however we want. Marco studied the numbers. And what do you want in return? Your vote on Monday, that's all. That's not nothing. No, Serena agreed. But it's fair. I'm offering you real growth in exchange for a vote that costs you nothing. Seems like a good deal to me. He agreed. That gave her 3 votes out of 5, enough to win, but she wasn't taking any chances. The Sunday before the vote, she received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, a familiar voice said, "Mrs. Rourke, it's Lila." Serena's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "I want you to leave him alone." Lila's voice was shaking but determined. "I know you're trying to destroy him, and I know you have reasons, but he's trying to be better. He's trying to be a good father to our daughter, and I—" "Stop," Serena said. "Just stop. Whatever story he's telling you about being a good father, about changing, about any of it, it's a lie. Dominic doesn't change. He adapts. He tells people what they want to hear until he gets what he wants, and then he moves on." "You don't know him like I do," Serena laughed. It wasn't a kind sound. "You've known him for what, a year? Maybe 2? I've known him for almost a decade. I've watched him promise loyalty and deliver betrayal. I've watched him swear honesty while building empires of lies. So don't tell me I don't know him. He loves me. Maybe he does. In whatever limited way he's capable of loving anyone. But love doesn't make him less destructive. It doesn't make him safe. And it definitely doesn't make him someone you should be defending to the wife he betrayed." Lila was crying now. "What do you want me to do? Leave him? Take my baby and just disappear? I want you to protect yourself and your daughter. I want you to understand that Dominic Rourke destroys everything he touches. And the only question is how much damage you're going to let him do before you get out. I can't just—" "Yes, you can. You have a child now. That changes everything. You owe it to her to choose stability over whatever fantasy Dominic sold you." Serena hung up before Lila could respond. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she realized she'd been gripping the phone hard enough to hurt. She poured herself a drink and stood at the window, looking out at the city that was about to become hers in a way it had never been before. Tomorrow, the council would vote, and tomorrow, everything would change. The call from Lila left Serena restless in a way she hadn't anticipated. She'd expected anger, maybe threats, possibly tears. What she hadn't expected was the raw desperation in the younger woman's voice, the kind of pleading that came from someone watching their entire world collapse in real time. Serena tried to sleep, but couldn't. At 2 a.m., she gave up and went to her office, pulling up the security footage from the Kenilworth house. She'd had cameras installed weeks ago, hidden so well that even Dominic's security sweeps hadn't found them. It was insurance, a way to track his movements and anticipate his next play. But now she watched for different reasons. The footage showed Dominic arriving around midnight, his car pulling into the circular driveway with none of his usual security detail. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. When Lila opened the door, she was holding the baby, and even through the grainy video, Serena could see the tension in their body language. They argued. Serena couldn't hear the words, but she could read the shape of them in Lila's gestures, in the way Dominic kept running his hands through his hair. Eventually, he took the baby, and Lila disappeared inside. He stood on the front steps for a long time, just holding his daughter, rocking her gently while he stared out at the darkened street. Serena closed the laptop. She didn't want to see more. Monday morning arrived with the kind of cold November rain that made Chicago feel like the edge of the world. Serena dressed carefully, a charcoal suit that was expensive without being flashy, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a way that said business, not apology. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone her father would have recognized. The council meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the same restaurant they'd used for the tribunal. Serena arrived 15 minutes early, which put her 5 minutes behind Victor Kozlov, who was already seated at the bar nursing an espresso. "Nervous?" he asked as she approached. "Should I be?" "If you weren't, I'd be concerned about your survival instincts." He gestured to the bartender. "What are you drinking?" "Water. I need a clear head." "Smart." Victor studied her over the rim of his cup. "You know Dominic's going to be here." That made Serena pause. "Why?" "He's suspended." "Because he requested the opportunity to address the council before the vote. They granted it." Victor's expression was unreadable. "Apparently he has something to say." "About?" "If I knew that, I'd tell you. But whatever it is, he thinks it's going to change minds." Victor set down his cup. "Be ready for anything." The meeting room was on the second floor, access through a private entrance that bypassed the restaurant entirely. When Serena walked in, 4 of the 5 council members were already seated around a heavy oak table that had probably witnessed more violence than most people saw in a lifetime. Tommy Chen nodded at her. Marco Delgado offered a slight smile. The other 2, Anthony Ricci and James Sullivan, old guard who'd been running their territories since before Serena was born, looked at her like she was something unpleasant they'd stepped in. "Mrs. Rourke," Sullivan said, his Irish accent still thick despite 40 years in Chicago, "didn't expect to see you here." "I was invited," Serena said calmly, taking a seat near the end of the table, "to present my proposal for operational restructuring." "Right, that." Ricci leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "The proposal where you think you should run your husband's territory while he's suspended." "Ex-husband," Serena corrected. "I filed for divorce last week. And it's not about running his territory. It's about stabilizing an organization that's been hemorrhaging resources and credibility. By taking over," Sullivan said, "by providing leadership where there currently is none." The door opened and Dominic walked in. He looked worse than he had in the security footage. His suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of nights without sleep. But his spine was straight, and when he looked at the council members, there was still fire in his eyes. "Gentlemen," he said, nodding to each of them. His gaze slid past Serena like she wasn't there. "Thank you for hearing me out." "You've got 10 minutes, Victor said, checking his watch. "Make them count." Dominic pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. "What you're looking at is evidence that my wife, ex-wife, has been systematically undermining this organization for months. She's made deals with the Bratva without council approval. She's diverted funds to offshore accounts that only she can access. And she's been feeding information to the FBI through her cousin, Special Agent Elena Navarro." The room went very still. Serena felt her pulse spike, but she kept her face neutral. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Dominic opened the folder, spreading photographs across the table. "Because these photos show you meeting with Victor Kozlov at Navy Pier last week. And these bank statements show transfers to accounts in the Caymans that match the timeline of when my money supposedly went missing." Victor picked up one of the photos, examined it, then set it down without comment. Tommy and Marco exchanged glances. "The FBI allegation," Sullivan said slowly. "You have proof?" "I have phone records showing regular calls between Serena and Elena Navarro. I have surveillance logs showing multiple meetings at public locations where they thought they wouldn't be noticed." Dominic looked directly at Serena for the first time. "And I have testimony from people who've heard her discuss providing information in exchange for protection." "From who?" Serena asked. Her voice was steady, but rage was building behind her ribs like pressure in a sealed container. "Who exactly is providing this testimony?" "People I trust more than I trust you. So no one. You're making accusations based on nothing because you're desperate." Serena stood up. "Let me address these one by one. Yes, I met with Victor. I met with all of you individually to discuss my proposal. That's not conspiracy, that's politics. The bank transfers Dominic's talking about are Arthur Reeves moving my father's legacy assets into protected accounts, so Dominic couldn't steal from them the way he stole $60 million from our shared operations. And as for my cousin, Elena Navarro is FBI," Ricci interrupted. "That's not in dispute. Elena is my cousin. We grew up together. We have lunch every few months and talk about normal family things. I've never discussed business with her, never provided information, never made any deals." Serena looked around the table. "You're taking the word of a man who lied to everyone in this room about where $60 million went. A man who built a second family while pretending to be loyal to his first. A man who's currently living with his pregnant ex-mistress, and their newborn baby while claiming he has this organization's best interests at heart." "That's personal," Dominic said. "This is business. It's all connected, and you know it. You've proven you can't be trusted in your personal life, and now you expect us to believe you can be trusted in business." Serena pulled out her own folder, the one she'd been preparing for weeks. "While we're sharing evidence, let me show you what Dominic's been doing for the past 3 years." She laid out the financial documents, the property records, the shell company registrations, every dollar traced, every transaction documented. Arthur had done exceptional work, and it showed. $62 million, Serena said, taken from accounts that were supposed to be used for expansion, for protection, for keeping our operations secure. Instead, he spent it on a house, a car, jewelry, medical bills, and setting up trust funds for a baby that didn't even exist yet. She turned to Dominic. You want to talk about betrayal? Let's talk about how you betrayed everyone at this table. Marco was going through the documents, his expression darkening. Tommy had pulled out his phone and was apparently cross-referencing numbers. Even Sullivan and Ricci looked troubled. These accounts, Marco said slowly, these are the ones we use for everything, Serena finished. Operations, payoffs, emergency funds. Dominic's been raiding them for years, and he's been careful enough that no one noticed until I started looking. I was going to pay it back, Dominic said. It was a loan against future earnings. You don't get to take loans from the general fund without approval, Victor cut in. His voice was cold. That's theft, plain and simple. It's more complicated than that. No, Tommy said, setting down his phone. It's really not. You stole from us. You compromised our security to fund your personal life, and now you're trying to deflect by making wild accusations about Serena. They're not wild, Dominic insisted. She's been planning this for months. She's the one who leaked my information to the press. She's the one who's been turning you all against me. She's the one who caught you, Ricci said flatly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're angry because she was smarter than you. Dominic's face flushed red. I built this organization. Before me, we were a collection of street gangs fighting over scraps. I created the structure, the territories, the partnerships. I made all of you rich. You built it on my father's foundation, Serena said quietly. You married into power, then pretended you'd created it yourself. But the connections, the relationships, the strategic framework, that all came from the South Side operation. You just repackaged it and took credit. Your father was dying when we merged operations. My father was smart enough to know he needed succession planning. He thought you'd honor his legacy, protect his daughter, build something that would last. Instead, you used it all as a stepping stone to your own ambitions. The room fell silent. Serena could see the council members processing everything, weighing the evidence against their own interests. This was the moment where everything would either come together or fall apart. Finally, Victor spoke. I've heard enough. Let's vote. Wait, Dominic said. You can't seriously be considering... The motion is to transfer operational control of Dominic Rourke's territories and assets to Serena Vale, pending a full restructuring review. All in favor? Victor's hand went up immediately. Tommy raised his hand. Marco hesitated for just a moment, then raised his as well. 3 votes. Serena had won. Sullivan and Ricci sat with their hands down, but it didn't matter. The majority had spoken. Motion carries, Victor said. Effective immediately, Serena Vale assumes control of all operations previously managed by Dominic Rourke. A full accounting of assets and territories will be completed within 30 days, at which point we'll vote on permanent assignment. Dominic stood up so fast his chair fell over. You can't do this. We just did, Marco said. Sit down, Dominic. I won't let her destroy everything I've built. You already destroyed it, Tommy cut in. We're just cleaning up the mess. Dominic looked around the table, and Serena saw the moment he realized he'd truly lost. The power, the respect, the fear he'd commanded for years, all of it gone in a single vote. This isn't over, he said, looking directly at Serena. Yes, she said calmly. It is. He left without another word, and the slamming door echoed through the room like a gunshot. The rest of the meeting was procedural. Serena presented her restructuring plan, answered questions about her approach to territorial management, outlined her strategy for rebuilding relationships with their allies. The council approved it with minimal discussion. They wanted stability, and she was offering exactly that. By 4 p.m., it was done. Serena walked out of that room with control of an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She should have felt victorious, triumphant, something. Instead, she just felt tired. Marcus was waiting in the parking garage, leaning against one of the SUVs that used to be Dominic's security detail. How'd it go? I won. Congratulations. He didn't sound surprised. What do you need from me? I need you to lock down the Kenilworth house. No one in or out without my approval. I need inventory of every safe house, every weapons cache, every piece of property Dominic controlled. And I need a list of everyone on the payroll who might still be loyal to him. Marcus pulled out his phone and started making notes. You expecting him to fight back? I'm expecting him to do something stupid because his ego won't let him accept losing. So yes, I'm expecting a fight. What about the girl, Lila? Serena paused. She'd been so focused on Dominic that she'd almost forgotten about his mistress and their baby. Put protection on her. Discreet. I don't want her to know she's being watched, but I want to know if anyone approaches her. You think someone's going to use her to get to you? I think she's a vulnerability, and vulnerabilities get exploited. I'd rather prevent that than deal with the fallout. Marcus nodded and headed to his vehicle. Serena stood in the parking garage for a moment, listening to the echo of car engines and the distant sound of Chicago traffic. Then she got into her own car, not the one she'd shared with Dominic, but a new one she'd purchased last week, and drove home. The penthouse felt different when she walked in. Bigger, maybe, or emptier. She couldn't decide which. She poured herself a drink and called Arthur. I heard, he said when he answered. Congratulations. Thank you. How quickly can you move on the asset transfers? I can start tomorrow. But Serena, you need to understand that Dominic's going to contest everything. He might not have counsel backing anymore, but he's still got resources, and he's going to use them. Let him try. Everything's documented. The council voted. He's done. He's not done until he accepts that he's done. And from what I know about Dominic Rourke, acceptance isn't his strong suit. Arthur was right, of course. Serena knew it even as she was dismissing his concerns. But she was too keyed up to think about contingencies right now. She'd just pulled off something that should have been impossible. A woman taking control of a major criminal organization without firing a single shot. She spent the rest of the evening going through files Marcus had sent over, learning the full scope of what she'd just inherited. It was more complicated than she'd anticipated. Dominic had his fingers in dozens of operations, some of which she'd known about, many of which she hadn't. Protection rackets, money laundering schemes, legitimate businesses used as fronts, real estate holdings across 3 states. And buried in the middle of it all, she found something that made her stop cold. A life insurance policy on Lila Hart, $2 million with Dominic as the beneficiary. Dated 3 months ago. Serena stared at the document for a long time, feeling something twist in her gut. Life insurance on a healthy 26-year-old woman wasn't unusual by itself, but combined with everything else, it painted a disturbing picture. She called Elena. I need you to do something, Serena said when her cousin answered, and I need you to do it quietly. How quietly are we talking? Off the books. Personal favor, not official FBI business. Elena sighed. What am I looking for? I need to know if there have been any hits taken out recently. Any contracts, any whispers about someone wanting a problem to disappear. Serena, that's not exactly my department. I know, but you have access to informants, to street intelligence. Just ask around. See if Dominic Rourke's name comes up in connection with anything like that. There was a long pause. You think he's planning to kill his mistress? I think he took out a $2 million life insurance policy on her 3 months ago, right around the time I started asking questions about his finances. And I think desperate men do desperate things. If he is planning something and I find out about it, I have to report it. You understand that? I understand. Just find out what you can. Serena hung up and immediately called Marcus back. I need security on Lila doubled, and I need someone inside the house. A nanny, a housekeeper, I don't care. Someone who can report back if anything unusual happens. You really think he'd go after the mother of his child? I think he'd do whatever it takes to eliminate problems. And right now, she's a problem. She's a witness to his indiscretion, a drain on resources he doesn't have, and a potential liability if she ever decides to talk to the wrong people. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I'll handle it. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings and reorganization. Serena met with every key player in the organization, from the street-level operators to the white-collar criminals who managed their legitimate businesses. She listened to their concerns, addressed their questions, and made it clear that while leadership had changed, The fundamental structure would remain stable. Most of them accepted it with varying degrees of grace. A few tested her, pushing boundaries to see if she'd enforce the same rules Dominic had. She did, swiftly and without mercy. Word spread quickly. The new boss was just as ruthless as the old one, maybe more so because she didn't let ego cloud her judgment. On Thursday, Elena called with information that made Serena's blood run cold. "I asked around like you wanted," Elena said. "And I heard something. It's not confirmed, and I can't prove it, but one of my informants says there's talk about a contract. Clean job, make it look like an accident. The target is a young mother, recently gave birth, lives on the North Shore." "Did you get a name?" "No, but the timeline matches. The contract supposedly went out last week, right after your council vote." "Who took it?" "That's where it gets interesting. Nobody local would touch it. Word is whoever put out the contract had to go outside Chicago, bring in someone with no connections to any of the families. Which meant it would be harder to track, harder to stop." Serena's mind raced through possibilities, scenarios, contingencies. "Elena, I need you to do something else for me. I need you to put Lila Hart and her baby in protective custody." "On what grounds? I can't just grab a civilian without cause." "Then find cause. Say you're investigating Dominic for money laundering, and she's a material witness. Say whatever you need to say, but get her somewhere safe." "Serena, if I do this and it blows back, it won't. Trust me." Elena agreed reluctantly, and Serena immediately called Marcus to coordinate. If Elena could get Lila into FBI protection, Marcus could ensure the transition happened smoothly without alerting whoever Dominic had hired. But first, Serena had to confirm her suspicions. She drove to Lila's apartment in Wicker Park, the small one-bedroom the younger woman had kept as a backup when she'd moved to Kenilworth. The building was old, with a security system that had probably been installed in the 90s and never updated. Serena let herself in with a lockpick she'd learned to use when she was 16. The apartment was dusty from disuse, but still furnished. Serena went through it methodically, looking for anything that might confirm what Dominic was planning. She found old mail, some clothes, takeout menus, nothing useful. Then she checked the bedroom closet. Hidden behind winter coats, she found a shoebox. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all written in Dominic's handwriting. Love letters, promises, assurances. Serena skimmed them, feeling nothing but cold anger. But at the bottom of the box, she found something else. A burner phone, still charged, with a single number in the call history. Serena dialed it. A man answered on the third ring. "Yeah?" "I'm calling about the Hart contract," Serena said, keeping her voice neutral. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants to make a better offer. Double the fee plus expenses if you walk away and never contact the client again." Silence. Then, "You got proof you can pay?" "Wire transfer untraceable, within the hour. All I need is confirmation that you're out." More silence. "This is irregular. So is killing a new mother for a man who can't afford to pay you what you're actually worth." The man laughed. "Fair point. Send the money. If it clears, I'm out." Serena got his account information and immediately called Arthur to arrange the transfer. 20 minutes later, the hitman confirmed receipt and the deal was done. One problem solved. But the bigger problem remained. Dominic had tried to have Lila killed, and he'd only failed because Serena had intervened. She needed to end this, permanently. That night, Serena requested a meeting with the full council. It was unusual to call an emergency session so soon after a vote, but Victor agreed to arrange it. They met in a different location this time, a warehouse on the south side that had been converted into what looked like a legitimate import-export business. "This better be important," Ricci said when they were all assembled. "I had plans tonight." "Dominic tried to have his mistress killed," Serena said without preamble. The room went silent. "You have proof?" Victor asked. Serena laid out everything: the life insurance policy, Elena's information about the contract, the phone call she'd made to the hitman. She even played the recording she'd made of their conversation, the one where the man had confirmed he was hired to eliminate a target on the North Shore. "He took out the contract the day after our vote," Serena said. "Probably figured if he couldn't have his empire, he'd at least cash in the insurance money and disappear." "That's cold," Tommy said. "Even for him." "It's also sloppy," Marco added. "Taking out a policy 3 months before the hit? Any investigator would see right through that." Desperation makes people stupid, Victor said. He looked at Serena. What do you want from us? Permission to handle it. Handle it how? Serena met his eyes. Permanently. The council members exchanged glances. This was the line, the moment where she'd either prove she belonged at this table or prove she was still too soft for the reality of their world. Sullivan leaned forward. You understand what you're asking? I understand perfectly. And you're prepared to do what needs to be done? I am. Another round of glances, then Victor nodded. You have 48 hours. Make it clean. Serena left the warehouse and drove straight to the Kenilworth house. Marcus met her there with 3 members of his security team, all of them people she'd vetted personally. He's inside, Marcus said. Showed up about an hour ago. Lila and the baby are already in FBI custody. We moved them this afternoon like you wanted. Good. Does he know? Not yet. He thinks they're at her mother's. Serena walked to the front door and knocked. When Dominic answered, he looked genuinely surprised to see her. What are you doing here? He asked. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Then just listen. Serena pushed past him into the house. It was exactly as the photos had shown. Expensively furnished, decorated in soft neutrals, a baby's nursery visible down the hall. Nice place. Must have cost a fortune. What do you want, Serena? She turned to face him. I want you to admit what you tried to do. I want you to say it out loud. I don't know what you're talking about. The contract on Lila, the $2 million life insurance policy, the plan to make it look like an accident so you could cash out and disappear. Serena pulled out her phone and played the recording of the hitman confirming the job. Dominic's face went white. You paid him off? I paid him more than you could afford, which wasn't difficult since you've burned through most of your liquid assets trying to fight a battle you'd already lost. She was going to talk, Dominic said. She was going to go to the police, to the press, to anyone who'd listen. She was going to destroy what's left of my reputation, so you decided to kill her and your daughter. The baby would have been fine. I would have taken her. You would have orphaned her and then raised her on blood money from her mother's death. You really think that makes it better? Dominic sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I didn't know what else to do. Everything's falling apart. I'm living in that girl's apartment, sleeping on a couch that smells like baby formula and regret. I have no money, no power, no respect. I'm nothing. You did this to yourself. No, you did this to me. You and your calculations and your strategic planning. You orchestrated all of this. I documented what you did and presented it to people who had a right to know. You're the one who stole, who lied, who cheated. I just made sure there were consequences. Dominic looked up at her and she saw something broken in his eyes. What happens now? Now you have a choice. You can disappear. Leave Chicago, change your name, start over somewhere far away where no one knows who you are or what you've done. Or you can stay and face what comes next. What comes next? Serena didn't answer. She didn't need to. They both knew what happened to people who violated council rules, who put hits on civilians, who became liabilities to the organization. How long do I have? Dominic asked quietly. 24 hours. After that, I can't protect you. You're not protecting me now. No, Serena agreed. But I'm giving you the chance to protect yourself. That's more than you would have given Lila. She left him sitting in that expensive house full of broken dreams and drove back to the penthouse. Marcus called an hour later to confirm that Dominic had packed a bag and left the property. Security footage showed him heading toward O'Hare Airport. Should we follow him? Marcus asked. No, let him go. You sure? Serena thought about it, about the boy she'd married, about the man he'd become, about all the ways he'd disappointed her. I'm sure. He's not worth the effort anymore. She hung up and poured herself a drink, standing at the window overlooking Chicago. Somewhere out there, Dominic Rourke was running from the wreckage of his life. And somewhere else, Lila Hart was holding her daughter, probably scared and confused, but at least alive. Serena had won. She'd taken everything from Dominic, his power, his empire, his future, without firing a shot or ordering a hit. She'd done it with strategy and patience and an understanding of human nature that her father would have admired. But victory felt hollow in a way she hadn't expected. Her phone buzzed with the text from Victor. Council convenes Friday to finalize your permanent appointment. Congratulations on cleaning house. Serena didn't respond. She just stood there, watching the city lights blur through the window, wondering if this was what power was supposed to feel like. Empty. The hollow feeling didn't go away. If anything, it grew worse over the next 3 days as Serena worked 16-hour stretches to consolidate her new position. She met with accountants, lawyers, territory managers, and foot soldiers. She signed papers, made decisions, restructured operations that Dominic had let deteriorate through negligence or incompetence. Everyone congratulated her. Everyone told her she was doing a brilliant job, and everyone looked at her like they were waiting for her to fail. Thursday afternoon, Arthur showed up at the penthouse unannounced, which was unusual enough that Serena immediately knew something was wrong. "We have a problem," he said, declining her offer of coffee. "A big one." "How big?" "Federal audit big. The IRS is looking into several of your legitimate businesses. They've requested documentation going back 5 years. Serena sat down slowly. "Which businesses? The tech consulting firm, the property management company, and the construction outfit. All of them major vehicles for moving money." Arthur pulled out his laptop. "Someone tipped them off. The timing's too convenient to be random." "Dominic?" "That would be my guess. He's gone, but he took files with him, copies of ledgers, transaction records, client lists. Everything they'd need to build a case. Can we handle it?" Arthur's expression was grim. "If it was just one business, maybe. But 3 simultaneous audits? They're going to find inconsistencies. And once they find one thread, they'll pull until the whole thing unravels." Serena stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Chicago went about its business, oblivious to the fact that one of its major criminal enterprises was about to implode. "How long do we have?" "Initial document requests are due in 30 days. But that's just the start. Once they get their hooks in, this could drag on for years." He paused. "Serena, I've done the math. If they pursue this aggressively, you're looking at RICO charges. Not just for you, for everyone in the organization. Which means the council will blame me." "They already are. I got a call from Marco this morning asking if it was true that you'd brought federal heat on all of them. Someone's spreading rumors that you're reckless, that you move too fast, that Dominic's revenge is going to destroy everything you just built." Serena's hands clenched into fists. She'd known Dominic wouldn't go quietly, but she'd underestimated how much damage he could do on his way out. He'd burned his own empire rather than let her have it. "I need to talk to the council," she said. "They're already planning an emergency meeting, tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. That's before the scheduled Friday session." "I know, they moved it up." Arthur closed his laptop. "Serena, you need to be prepared for them to revoke your appointment. They're scared, and scared men make defensive decisions. They should be more scared of what happens if they cut me loose. I'm the only one who knows how to navigate this." "Then you better make sure they understand that." After Arthur left, Serena called Marcus. "I need eyes on Dominic." "Where did he go?" "Mexico, last we tracked. Flew to Guadalajara under an alias, then went dark." "How dark?" "No credit card usage, no phone activity, nothing. Either he's being very careful or someone's helping him disappear. Find him. I don't care what it costs or what you have to do. Find him and bring me proof of where he is and who he's talking to." Marcus hesitated. "Serena, if you're thinking about sending someone after him..." "I'm not. I just need to know if he's planning more attacks or if this was his last play." She rubbed her temples. "The council meeting is tomorrow. I need ammunition." "I'll see what I can do." That night, Serena couldn't sleep. She kept running scenarios, trying to figure out how to salvage this. The federal audits were a nightmare, but they weren't insurmountable. Arthur was right that they'd find irregularities, but that didn't automatically mean prosecution. Plenty of businesses survived IRS scrutiny if they had good lawyers and plausible deniability. The real problem was perception. The council needed to believe she could handle the pressure, that bringing her in hadn't been a mistake. And right now, with Dominic's parting shot threatening everyone's operations, they were looking for someone to blame. Around 3 a.m., her phone rang. It was Elena. "I shouldn't be calling you," her cousin said without preamble. "But I thought you should know. The task force looking into organized crime in Chicago just got a major influx of resources. They're setting up a special unit, bringing in prosecutors from D.C., the whole 9 yards. Because of the audits? Because someone provided them with a roadmap to your entire operation, bank accounts, shell companies, names of corrupt officials, everything. It's the most comprehensive intelligence package they've seen in a decade. Serena's stomach dropped. Dominic, that's my assumption, but here's the thing. The person who delivered it didn't do it in person. It came through an intermediary, a lawyer who claimed to be representing a confidential informant seeking immunity. Did they grant it? Not yet. They want to verify the information first. But Serena, if even half of what's in that package is accurate, they're going to dismantle your organization piece by piece. How long do I have? Weeks, maybe a month before they start making moves? They'll build the case first, make sure it's airtight, then come down hard all at once. Can you tell me what's in the package? I can't. I'm already risking my career just telling you this much. Elena's voice softened. I'm sorry. I know this is bad. It's worse than bad. It's extinction level. After hanging up, Serena sat in the dark penthouse and forced herself to think clearly. She had maybe 4 weeks before the federal government came down on them like a hammer. The council meeting was in 7 hours, and Dominic was out there somewhere, probably feeling very proud of himself for burning down the kingdom rather than surrender it. She needed a plan. Not just a defensive strategy, but an offensive one. Something that would turn this disaster into an opportunity. By the time the sun came up, she had it. The emergency council meeting was held in a conference room at one of Marco's legitimate businesses, a restaurant supply company that did enough real commerce to justify the occasional private meeting. When Serena walked in, all 5 members were already there, and none of them looked happy. Gentlemen, she said, taking her seat, I know why we're here. Do you? Sullivan's Irish accent was thick with anger. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you took over Dominic's operations and immediately brought the entire federal government down on our heads. Dominic brought the government down on us. I'm just the one who has to clean it up. By doing what? Ricci demanded. You got a magic wand that makes federal prosecutors disappear? No, but I have something better. I have a strategy that will protect all of us while simultaneously eliminating the threat. Victor leaned back in his chair. I'm listening. Serena pulled out a folder and distributed copies to each council member. What you're looking at is a comprehensive reorganization plan. We're going to shut down every business that's been compromised, liquidate the assets, and distribute the proceeds according to each member's stake. That's surrender, Marco said. That's cutting off the infected limb before it kills the patient. Those businesses are dead already. The audits will destroy them no matter what we do. But if we shut them down ourselves, claim financial difficulties, and cooperate with the investigators, we control the narrative. Cooperate? Sullivan looked like he wanted to reach across the table. You want us to work with the feds? I want us to give them exactly what they expect to find. Failing businesses with sloppy bookkeeping and minor tax irregularities. Nothing that rises to the level of organized crime. Nothing that justifies a RICO case. Serena met each of their eyes in turn. We take a small loss now to avoid a catastrophic loss later. And what about the operations those businesses were covering? Tommy asked. We move them. Diversify them across new entities, new structures, new people who have no connection to the old organization. It'll take time and money, but it's better than prison. Victor was studying the documents carefully. This is actually smart. Painful, but smart. It's also incomplete, Ricci said. What about Dominic? He's the one who gave them this information. As long as he's out there, he can keep feeding them intelligence. Which is why we're going to neutralize him, Serena said. The room went very quiet. Neutralize how? Marco asked carefully. We're going to give the FBI a bigger fish. Someone they want more than they want us. Serena pulled out another document. I've been in contact with a federal prosecutor through back channels. They're interested in building a case against a certain Mexican cartel that's been expanding into the Midwest. If we provide evidence of their operations, testimony about their methods, and intelligence about their leadership, the task force gets redirected. You want to start a war with the Sinaloa cartel? Sullivan looked incredulous. I want to give the FBI something more interesting to investigate than a handful of Chicago businesses with questionable tax practices. The cartel is already on their radar. We're just helping them build a better case. And Dominic? Dominic's in Mexico, probably being sheltered by cartel contacts he's made over the years. If we can connect him to their operations, prove he's been facilitating their expansion into our territories, then he becomes part of their investigation instead of ours. Tommy was nodding slowly. You frame him as a cartel asset instead of a local operator. Exactly. It shifts the entire focus of the investigation. We become witnesses instead of targets. Victor set down the documents and looked at Serena with something that might have been respect. This could work. It's risky as hell, but it could work. It's also going to require all of you to be willing to give testimony under immunity agreements, Serena said. Limited immunity, carefully negotiated, but still. You'll have to sit in front of federal prosecutors and tell them things about how we operate. Controlled leaks, Marco said. Give them just enough to make the testimony valuable without exposing anything critical. Right. Arthur's already working on the immunity agreements. He's got lawyers who specialize in this kind of thing. Ricci was still skeptical. And if this backfires, if they use our testimony to build cases against us anyway, then we're no worse off than we are now. Dominic's package is going to bury us if we don't do something. This is the only play that gives us a chance. The council members exchanged glances. Serena could see them calculating, weighing the risks against the alternatives. Finally, Victor spoke. I'm in. But I want Arthur's lawyers to review every word of my testimony before it goes anywhere near a prosecutor. Agreed, Serena said. One by one, the others fell in line, even Sullivan and Ricci, though they made it clear they weren't happy about it. There's one more thing, Serena said. This only works if we're completely unified. If anyone breaks ranks, if anyone tries to make a side deal or protect their own interests at the expense of the group, the whole thing falls apart. You talking about anyone specific? Marco asked. I'm talking about all of us. We need to be a united front, at least until this is over. And then what? Sullivan asked. After the investigation is redirected and the heat dies down, what happens to your appointment? Do we go back to fighting over territory? That depends on whether you want stability or chaos, Serena said. I've shown you I can handle a crisis. I've shown you I can think strategically and make hard decisions. The question is whether you trust me enough to lead us through what comes next. The council members looked at each other. Then Victor raised his hand. I vote to make Serena's appointment permanent. She's earned it. Tommy raised his hand. So did Marco. Sullivan and Ricci hesitated, then slowly raised theirs as well. Motion carries, Victor said. Congratulations, Serena. You're officially one of us now. Serena should have felt triumphant. She'd just secured a permanent seat on the council, something no woman had ever done in Chicago's criminal history. But all she felt was the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders like a lead blanket. Thank you, she said. I won't let you down. The meeting adjourned, and Serena spent the rest of the day coordinating with Arthur's legal team. They needed to approach the federal prosecutors carefully, make it seem like the information about the cartel was coming from concerned citizens rather than criminal organizations trying to redirect an investigation. It was delicate work, and one wrong move could expose their real intentions. By Friday afternoon, they had their approach figured out. Arthur would reach out to a prosecutor he'd worked with years ago, someone who specialized in cartel cases, and would jump at the chance to build a major RICO prosecution. They'd feed him information gradually, let him think he was developing his own intelligence network rather than being manipulated. Serena was in her office reviewing the strategy when Marcus called. I found Dominic, he said. He's in a town called San Miguel de Allende, about 3 hours north of Mexico City, staying in a villa owned by a known cartel facilitator. Is he working with them? Looks like it. My contact down there says he's been meeting with mid-level guys offering to help them expand their Chicago operations in exchange for protection. Serena closed her eyes. Of course he was. Dominic couldn't just disappear and start over. He had to try to rebuild his empire, even if it meant partnering with people who'd eventually kill him. Get photos, she said. Documentation of every meeting, every contact. We need evidence that ties him directly to cartel operations. Already on it. Should have a full package by Monday. Good. Send it to Arthur as soon as you have it. That night, Serena had dinner with Elena at a small restaurant in Pilsen, far enough from downtown that they were unlikely to be recognized. "You look terrible," Elena said when Serena sat down. "Thanks. You look great too." "I'm serious. When's the last time you slept?" "I don't remember. Tuesday, maybe?" Serena ordered coffee instead of wine. "How much trouble am I in with your people?" "Professionally, I'm probably going to get reassigned after this. They know we're related, and once the immunity deals start flowing, they're going to question every case I've ever worked on." Elena picked at her food. "Personally, I'm terrified you're going to get yourself killed." "I'm not going to get killed. You're playing chicken with the federal government and a Mexican cartel. Simultaneously, one of them is going to run you over." "Not if I'm faster and smarter than they are." Elena set down her fork. "Listen to yourself. You sound like what?" "Like Dominic. Like someone who thinks they're invincible right up until the moment they're not." That hit harder than Serena wanted to admit. She took a sip of coffee, buying time to compose herself. "I'm not Dominic. I'm cleaning up his mess, not creating new ones." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're following the same playbook. Make big moves, eliminate threats, consolidate power. The only difference is you're better at it than he was." "And that's a bad thing?" "It is if it costs you everything that makes you human." Elena reached across the table and took her hand. "Serena, you're my cousin, my family, and I'm watching you turn into something that scares me. I'm doing what I have to do." That's what they all say. Right before they cross a line, they can't uncross. Serena pulled her hand back. "I need to go. Thanks for dinner." "Serena." But she was already leaving, walking out into the cold Chicago night before her cousin could see the tears forming. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to get her breathing under control. Elena was wrong. She had to be wrong. Serena wasn't becoming Dominic. She was just doing what needed to be done to survive, to protect what was hers, to build something that would last. But a small voice in the back of her mind whispered that maybe survival wasn't enough. Maybe building something that lasted required more than just eliminating threats and consolidating power. Maybe it required actually being human. She drove back to the penthouse and stood at the window, looking out at the city she now controlled. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives, going to jobs they hated, dealing with bosses who didn't appreciate them, worrying about bills and mortgages, and whether their kids would get into good schools. Normal problems. Human problems. Serena couldn't remember the last time she'd worried about something that simple. Her phone buzzed with a text from Arthur. "Immunity agreements are drafted. Ready for your review." She spent the next 3 hours going through legal documents, making sure every word protected her interests while giving the prosecutors enough to build their case against the cartel. It was tedious work, the kind of thing that required absolute focus and attention to detail. It was also exactly the kind of distraction she needed. By Sunday, Marcus had delivered the full intelligence package on Dominic's cartel connections. The photos were damning, clear shots of him meeting with known enforcers, accepting money, touring facilities that were obviously being used for drug distribution. Arthur took one look at the package and whistled. "This is gold. The prosecutors are going to lose their minds when they see this." "How do we get it to them without it being obvious where it came from?" "We don't give it to them directly. We leak it to a journalist who covers cartel activity, let them publish enough to get the FBI's attention, then have our prosecutor friend discover additional evidence through his own investigation. How long will that take?" 2 weeks, maybe 3. We need to be patient on this." Patience. Serena was running out of that particular commodity, but she nodded and let Arthur work his magic. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Serena shut down the 3 businesses facing audits, filed bankruptcy paperwork, and began the process of liquidating assets. She met with nervous employees, reassured frightened investors, and navigated a minefield of legal complications. At the same time, she restructured the remaining operations, creating new entities with new ownership structures that would be harder to trace back to the council. It was exhausting work that required her to be in 3 places at once, making decisions that affected hundreds of people's lives. And through it all, she kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It finally did on a Tuesday afternoon when Elena called, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "What the hell did you do?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with me. The cartel investigation just went into overdrive. We've got evidence packages appearing out of nowhere, anonymous tips that are too detailed to be from random sources, and suddenly my entire task force is being redirected to focus on Mexican organized crime instead of local operations. Sounds like good news for Chicago. It sounds like manipulation. And if anyone traces this back to you, if anyone figures out that you orchestrated this whole thing, you're not looking at tax evasion anymore. You're looking at obstruction of justice, conspiracy, witness tampering. Elena, I appreciate your concern. This isn't concern. This is me telling you that you're about to step off a cliff and you don't even see the edge. I see it. I just know how to fly. Elena was quiet for a long moment. I can't protect you anymore. You understand that? Whatever happens next, you're on your own. I know, and I'm sorry I dragged you into this. You didn't drag me into anything. I walked in with my eyes open. Elena's voice softened slightly. But Serena, please, think about what you're doing. Think about whether this is really who you want to be. I stopped being able to choose who I want to be a long time ago. Now I'm just trying to survive. That's not true. You always have a choice. But after they hung up, Serena wondered if Elena was right. Did she still have choices? Or had she painted herself into a corner where the only way forward was through more manipulation, more strategy, more calculated moves that pushed her further from anything resembling a normal life? She pushed the thoughts aside and focused on the work. The journalist Arthur had published his first article about Dominic's cartel connections on Wednesday. By Friday, it had blown up into a major investigative series. And by the following Monday, the FBI task force had officially redirected their focus. Arthur called with the news. It worked. The prosecutors are salivating over the cartel case. They're putting together a joint task force with DEA and Mexican authorities. And the audits? Still proceeding, but at a much lower priority. The agents assigned to them have been reassigned to the cartel investigation. We'll probably face some fines for the businesses we shut down, but nothing that threatens the organization. Serena should have felt relieved. Instead, she just felt tired. Good work, Arthur. You did the hard part. I just helped execute. After hanging up, Serena walked to the window and looked out at Chicago. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows across the buildings. In a few hours, rush hour would start, and millions of people would head home to families and friends and lives that didn't require constant calculation. She wondered what that felt like. Her phone rang again. This time it was Victor. I'm calling a council meeting, he said. Tomorrow night, we need to discuss next steps now that the heat's off. What kind of next steps? The kind where we figure out what our organization looks like going forward. You've proven you can handle a crisis. Now we need to see if you can handle success. Success, it turned out, was harder to navigate than crisis. The council meeting the next night felt different from all the others. There was no urgency, no immediate threat to address. Instead, there was something almost casual about the way the five of them sat around the table at Marco's restaurant, drinks in hand, discussing the future like they were planning a business expansion rather than managing a criminal empire. The cartel investigation is going to run for months, maybe years, Victor said, swirling his vodka, which gives us breathing room to rebuild what we lost in the shutdowns. We need to be smarter about it this time, Tommy added. More separation between the legitimate businesses and the actual operations. Cleaner lines. Marco nodded. I've been working with some consultants, legal ones, ironically, who specialize in corporate structure. They can help us create entities that can withstand scrutiny. Serena listened to them talk, watched them plan, and felt a strange disconnect. These were the men who'd voted to give her a seat at this table, who'd trusted her to navigate them through an existential threat. And she'd delivered. The organization was intact, the federal investigation had been redirected, and they were all still free. But sitting here, listening to them discuss quarterly projections and market share like they were running a Fortune 500 company instead of a criminal syndicate, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. What about you, Serena? Sullivan asked, pulling her from her thoughts. You've been quiet. What's your vision for where we go from here? She set down her untouched drink. I think we need to start transitioning out of the criminal operations entirely. The room went silent. Excuse me, Ricci said finally. I'm serious. We've built enough legitimate businesses, enough real assets that we don't need the illegal operations anymore. They're what brings the heat, what creates the risk. If we slowly phase them out over the next few years, invest everything in legitimate enterprises, we could actually become boring, Marco interrupted. Serena, we're not businessmen playing at being criminals. We're criminals who happen to run businesses. Are we? Because from where I'm sitting, most of our income now comes from legitimate sources. The illegal operations are almost nostalgia at this point. They're what we do because it's what we've always done, not because they're actually profitable. Victor was studying her with an unreadable expression. You're talking about going straight. I'm talking about evolution, about building something that lasts beyond us, beyond the constant threat of investigation and prosecution and prison. Serena leaned forward. My father spent 20 years running the South Side. And what did he have to show for it when he died? Nothing. No legacy, no empire that survived him, just a territory that got absorbed into someone else's operation. He had you, Tommy said quietly. He had a daughter who watched him work himself to death for something that disappeared the moment he was gone. I don't want that. I want to build something real. Sullivan laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. You want to be legitimate. You want to walk away from everything that got you that seat and pretend you're just another businesswoman. I want to be smart enough to see the writing on the wall. Federal investigations are getting more sophisticated, asset forfeiture laws are getting stronger, and the profit margins on illegal operations are shrinking every year. We're fighting a losing battle, and the smart move is to exit while we still can. The smart move, Ricci said, his voice cold, is to keep doing what we've always done. What's worked for decades. Until it doesn't work anymore. Until one of us gets caught, makes a deal, and brings the whole thing down. Serena met each of their eyes. I'm not saying we do this overnight. I'm saying we develop a 5-year plan to transition our operations, diversify our holdings, and position ourselves so that when the next crisis comes, and it will come, we're insulated from it. Victor set down his glass. You've really thought this through. I've thought about nothing else for the past week. And if we say no, if we vote to continue operating the way we always have, Serena had expected this question, then I'll respect the council's decision, but I won't participate in the illegal operations anymore. I'll manage my territories through legitimate businesses only. That's not how this works, Sullivan said, his accent thickening with anger. You don't get to pick and choose which parts of the organization you participate in. Actually, I do. I have a council seat. I have autonomy over my territories, and I choose to run them legally. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Serena could see the calculations happening behind their eyes, the weighing of options and consequences. She'd just drawn a line in the sand, and they had to decide whether to respect it or try to force her across it. Finally, Marco spoke. I think she's right. Everyone turned to look at him. Not about everything, he continued, but about needing to evolve. The casino operations have been moving toward legitimacy for years because that's where the real money is. Legal gambling, properly licensed, with all the protections that come from operating in the light instead of the shadows. He looked at Serena. I'm willing to consider a transition plan. 5 years is probably optimistic, but 10? Maybe. You can't be serious, Ricci said. I'm very serious. I'm also 63 years old and tired of looking over my shoulder every time a cop car drives by. If there's a way to keep making money without the constant threat of prison, I'm interested in hearing it. Tommy nodded slowly. I'm willing to listen too, though I agree with Marco, 5 years is too aggressive. Victor was still watching Serena, his expression thoughtful. You'd need unanimous council support to pull this off. Any one of us could sabotage it by refusing to cooperate. I know, which is why I'm proposing we bring in outside consultants to develop the plan. Let experts tell us what's actually feasible, what the timeline should be, what the financial implications are. Then we vote on whether to proceed. And if Sullivan and Ricci vote no, then we maintain the status quo. But at least we'll have had the conversation. Sullivan stood up abruptly. This is madness. You're talking about dismantling everything our predecessors built, everything we've maintained for decades, because you're scared of a little heat. I'm talking about survival, Serena said quietly. And if you can't see the difference, then maybe you're too stuck in the past to help build the future. Sullivan looked like he wanted to hit something. Instead, he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. I'm voting no, on all of it. And if the rest of you are stupid enough to follow her down this path, don't come crying to me when it all falls apart. He left, the door slamming behind him. Ricci stood more slowly. I need time to think about this. It's a lot to process. He looked at Serena. But I'll say this, you've got courage. Stupid, reckless courage, but courage nonetheless. After he left, the remaining three sat in silence for a moment. Well, Marco said finally, that went better than expected. Did it? Serena asked. Sullivan was always going to say no. He's old school, stuck in his ways. But Ricci's willing to think about it, which means he might be persuadable. Marco finished his drink. You've got my vote to bring in consultants. Let's see what they say. Mine too, Tommy said, though I think you should prepare yourself for this taking a lot longer than 10 years. I'll take 20 if it means we all stay out of prison. Victor was the last to speak. I'm abstaining for now. I want to see the consultant's report before I commit to anything. But Serena, I'll say this. You're either the smartest person who's ever sat at this table, or you're about to destroy everything we've built. There's no middle ground. I know. After the meeting, Serena drove to the lakefront and parked, staring out at the dark water. The conversation had gone better than she'd feared, but worse than she'd hoped. She had 2 solid votes, 1 abstention, and 2 hard no's. Not enough to move forward, but not a complete rejection either. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Package arrived from Mexico. You need to see this. She drove to Marcus's office, a nondescript building in the Loop that looked like any other security consulting firm. He was waiting for her in the conference room, a tablet on the table in front of him. What is it? She asked. Footage from our guy in San Miguel. Dominic met with someone 2 days ago. Someone you need to see. He played the video. The quality was grainy, shot from a distance, but clear enough to make out faces. Dominic was sitting at an outdoor cafe, and across from him was a woman Serena recognized immediately. Lila Hart. How is that possible? Serena asked. She's supposed to be in FBI protective custody. She was. Then she signed herself out 3 days ago, against their advice, took the baby, and flew to Mexico. To meet with Dominic. Looks like it. Serena watched the video play out. Dominic and Lila talked for almost an hour, their body language tense but not hostile. At one point, Lila passed him something, papers maybe, or photographs. Dominic looked at them for a long time, then stood up and walked away without another word. Can you get audio? Our guy tried, but they were too far away. All we have is video. Where are they now? Lila went back to her hotel. Dominic went to the villa where he's been staying. They haven't contacted each other since. Serena sat down, her mind racing. Why would Lila travel to Mexico to meet with the man who'd tried to have her killed? What could she possibly have to say to him? I need to talk to her, Serena said. That's a bad idea. Mexico's dangerous right now, especially for you. The cartel knows who you are, and they're not happy about the investigation you helped launch. I don't care. I need to know what she and Dominic discussed. Then let me send someone to... No. This is personal. I need to do it myself. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Fine, but you're taking a security team, and you're in and out in 24 hours. No arguments. They flew to Mexico the next day, Serena, Marcus, and 3 of his best people. Lila was staying at a small hotel in the historic center of San Miguel, the kind of place that catered to American expats looking for cheap rent and good weather. Serena knocked on her door at 7 a.m., early enough that she'd still be there, but not so early it seemed like an ambush. Lila opened the door holding her daughter, her eyes widening when she saw Serena. What are you doing here? We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. That's fine. I'll do the talking. Serena pushed past her into the room. It was small but clean, with a single bed and a crib in the corner. Evidence of Lila's presence was everywhere. Baby bottles, diapers, clothes hanging over the bathroom door. You can't just barge in here. I can do whatever I want, especially when you've been meeting with my ex-husband behind my back. Lila's face went pale. How did you... I have eyes everywhere. The real question is why. Why would you come all this way to meet with the man who took out a contract on your life? Lila sat down on the bed, still holding the baby. Because he's my daughter's father. Because despite everything he's done, she deserves to know him. She deserves to be safe. She deserves a mother who's smart enough not to put her in danger. He's changed. He told me he's sorry, that he never meant for things to go that far. He lied. Dominic always lies. It's what he does. Serena knelt down in front of her. Listen to me. Whatever he told you, whatever promises he made, they're not real. He's desperate and dangerous, and he'll use you and that baby to get what he wants. What does he want? Revenge. Against me, against the council, against everyone who took away his power. And if you're stupid enough to help him, you'll end up dead or in prison. Probably both. Lila's eyes filled with tears. I just wanted her to have a father. I didn't want her to grow up the way I did, wondering why her dad didn't love her enough to stick around. Your father died in an accident. Dominic's alive and making terrible choices. Those aren't the same thing. I know, but She looked down at her daughter, who was sleeping peacefully despite the tension in the room. I don't know what to do. Serena stood up. You go back to Chicago. You accept the FBI's protection. You raise your daughter somewhere safe, away from all of this. And you never, ever contact Dominic again. He said he'd give me money, enough to start over somewhere new. He's lying. He doesn't have money. He stole from his own organization and blew it all on you. And now he's got nothing left but rage and desperation. Serena pulled out her phone and showed Lila the documentation of Dominic's financial situation. See this? He's broke. Whatever he promised you is worthless. Lila stared at the screen, her face crumbling. He showed me papers, bank statements, account numbers, forgeries, good ones probably, but fake. Serena put her phone away. Lila, I know you want to believe he's capable of change, but some people aren't, and Dominic is one of them. Why do you care what happens to me? It was a fair question. Serena had spent months destroying Dominic, had orchestrated his complete downfall without hesitation. Lila should have been just another casualty, another piece of collateral damage in a war Serena had started. But sitting here, looking at this young woman holding her baby, Serena saw something she recognized. Desperation. The need to believe that love could fix broken things, that people could change if you just gave them enough chances. She'd believed that once too. I care because you and that baby don't deserve to be destroyed by Dominic's choices, Serena said. You were stupid to get involved with a married man, and you're being stupid now by trusting him. But stupidity shouldn't be a death sentence. Lila wiped her eyes. What do I do? You come back to Chicago with me. Today. We get you set up somewhere safe with a new identity, new papers, everything you need to start over, and you never look back. Why would you help me? Because I'm trying to be better than Dominic, and that means not leaving bodies in my wake. It took another hour to convince Lila, but eventually she agreed. They packed her meager belongings, arranged for a car to take them to the airport, and were wheels up before noon. During the flight back, Serena held the baby while Lila slept. The infant was tiny, impossibly fragile, with Dominic's dark hair and Lila's delicate features. She looked nothing like the weapon Dominic had tried to use her as, nothing like the complication that had nearly destroyed everything. She just looked like a baby who deserved better than the family she'd been born into. What's her name? Serena asked when Lila woke up. Grace. I named her Grace. That's a good name. Back in Chicago, Serena set Lila up in a safe apartment in Evanston, far from any of the organization's usual territories. She arranged for childcare, enrolled Lila in community college classes, and created a trust fund that would cover Grace's expenses until she turned 18. Why are you doing all this? Lila asked as Serena was leaving. Because that baby didn't ask to be born into this mess. And because I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if I could have saved you both. What happens to Dominic? Serena paused at the door. He's not your problem anymore. He's mine. 3 weeks later, news reached Chicago that Dominic Rourke had been arrested by Mexican federal police in connection with cartel operations. The charges were extensive: money laundering, conspiracy, facilitating drug trafficking. He was looking at 20 years minimum in a Mexican prison. Serena read the report and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no sense of justice served, just emptiness where her marriage used to be. The consultant's report came back 2 months later. It was thorough, professional, and surprisingly optimistic. According to their analysis, a full transition to legitimate operations was feasible within 15 years if the council committed to specific benchmarks and milestones. The vote was closer than Serena expected. Victor ended up supporting the plan after extensive negotiations about timeline and implementation. Ricci abstained. Sullivan voted against it, but didn't have enough support to block it. The motion passed 4-1. "Well," Victor said after the vote, "I hope you know what you're doing." "So do I," Serena admitted. The transition began slowly. They divested from the riskiest operations first: the protection rackets, the illegal gambling, the loan sharking. They reinvested the proceeds in real estate, technology startups, legitimate financial services. It was boring work, the kind that required patience and planning, rather than quick decisions and bold moves. Serena found she was good at it. A year after taking control of Dominic's empire, she sat in her office overlooking Chicago and took stock of what she'd built. The organization was smaller than it had been under Dominic, but more stable. Their profit margins were lower, but more sustainable. They'd lost some of the old guard who couldn't adapt to the new reality, but they'd gained young talent who understood the changing landscape. And most importantly, none of them were under federal investigation. Her phone rang. It was Elena. "I'm calling to tell you I got reassigned," her cousin said. "Out of organized crime into white-collar fraud." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's actually a relief. I don't have to worry about arresting my own family anymore." Elena paused. "How are you doing? Really?" Serena looked out at the city. "I'm okay. It's different than I expected, but okay." "Different how?" "Lonelier. I thought winning would feel better than this." "Winning usually does feel lonely, especially when you've had to burn everything down to get there." "I didn't burn everything. I built something new." "Did you? Or did you just repaint the same building?" It was a question Serena kept coming back to over the following months. She'd dismantled Dominic's empire and rebuilt it in her own image, but had she actually changed anything fundamental, or had she just become a more efficient version of what he'd been? She didn't have an answer. 2 years after taking her seat on the council, Serena received an unexpected visitor. Arthur showed up at her office with someone she didn't recognize. A young woman, maybe 25, dressed in business casual and carrying a leather portfolio. "Serena, this is Jennifer Chen," Arthur said. "Tommy's daughter. She just graduated from Stanford Business School, and she's interested in learning the family business." Serena shook Jennifer's hand. "The legitimate side or the other side?" "The legitimate side," Jennifer said without hesitation. "My father told me what you're doing, how you're transitioning the organization. I want to be part of that." Over the next hour, Jennifer laid out her vision for modernizing their operations, incorporating new technologies, expanding into markets they'd never considered. She was smart, articulate, and completely fearless in a way that reminded Serena of herself at that age. "What do you think?" Jennifer asked when she'd finished her presentation. "I think you're going to be running this place in 10 years. "That's the plan." After she left, Serena sat alone in her office and allowed herself a small smile. Maybe Elena had been wrong. Maybe she hadn't just repainted the same building. Maybe she'd laid the foundation for something genuinely different, something that could outlast all of them. 3 years after Dominic's arrest, Serena received a letter from him. It had been forwarded through multiple channels, heavily redacted by prison censors, but the core message came through clearly enough. He was dying. Liver cancer, advanced stage. The Mexican prison system wasn't known for its medical care, and he'd been denied transfer to a facility that could treat him properly. He wanted to see her. Serena stared at the letter for a long time. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let him die alone in that prison without the satisfaction of a final conversation. But another part, a smaller, quieter part she'd tried to suppress, wondered if there was something he needed to say, or something she needed to hear. She flew to Mexico alone, against Marcus's strong objections. The prison was exactly as grim as she'd imagined: concrete walls, barbed wire, guards who looked at her with undisguised contempt. They brought Dominic to a visiting room that smelled like bleach and despair. He'd aged 20 years and 3, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. When he saw her, something flickered across his expression, surprise maybe, or relief. You came, he said, his voice hoarse. I came. They sat across from each other, separated by a scratched plexiglass barrier. Serena waited for him to speak, to explain why he'd asked her here. I'm sorry, he said finally. For all of it. The affair, the stealing, the contract on Lila. I'm sorry. Okay. That's it? Just okay. What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? I don't. What you did was unforgivable. Dominic nodded slowly. I know, but I needed you to hear me say it anyway. I needed you to know that I understand what I destroyed. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure there were consequences. You destroyed me, he corrected. Systematically, brilliantly, completely. I never saw it coming. You were too busy congratulating yourself to notice. Yeah. He tried to laugh, but it turned into a cough. I was always my own worst enemy. You just helped me finish the job. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Dominic leaned forward. Is it true what I heard? That you're going legitimate? It's true. And the council agreed to it? Eventually. That's remarkable. I never could have pulled that off. I know. He studied her through the plexiglass. You're going to build something that lasts, aren't you? Something real. That's the plan. Good. That's good. He sat back. Grace, how is she? She's fine. Happy, growing up somewhere safe. Does she know about me? Not yet. Lila will tell her when she's old enough to understand. Tell Lila I'm sorry. Tell her I never meant for any of this to happen. I'm not your messenger. You want to apologize to her? You write your own letter. Dominic smiled faintly. Still tough. I always loved that about you. Don't. What? Don't try to make this nostalgic. Don't try to pretend we had something worth remembering fondly. You made choices that destroyed our marriage long before I made choices that destroyed your empire. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment. Do you ever think about what we could have been if I hadn't screwed it up? Serena stood up. No, I don't waste time on hypotheticals. Serena, wait. She paused at the door. Thank you for coming, for letting me say what I needed to say. She looked back at him one last time. Goodbye, Dominic. She walked out of that prison and never looked back. Dominic died 6 weeks later. There was a small service in Chicago attended by people who'd worked for him, who remembered when he'd been powerful and feared. Serena didn't go. Neither did Lila. The council voted to split his remaining assets among the members. Serena's share went into the trust fund for Grace. 5 years after taking control, Serena stood in front of the council and presented a report on their progress. They'd successfully transitioned 70% of their operations to legitimate businesses. Their combined net worth had actually increased despite divesting from illegal activities. And most importantly, not one of them had been arrested or investigated in those 5 years. It's working, she said. Everything we said we'd do, we're doing it. Ahead of schedule, Marco added. He'd become Serena's strongest ally on the council, championing the transition even when it cost him personally. So what's next? Tommy asked. Next, we finish the job. We divest from the remaining illegal operations, complete the transition, and position ourselves as a legitimate business consortium. In 10 years, no one will remember we were ever anything else. Except us, Sullivan said. He'd softened over the years, had eventually come around to supporting the transition. We'll always know what we were. That's true, Serena agreed. But knowing what we were doesn't mean we can't become something different. The final vote to complete the transition was unanimous. 8 years after destroying Dominic's empire, Serena stood at the window of her penthouse and watched the sun set over Chicago. The city looked different now, or maybe she just saw it differently. Either way, it was still beautiful. Her phone buzzed with the text from Jennifer Chen, who was now running day-to-day operations while Serena focused on strategic planning. Quarterly numbers are in. We're up 18%. Serena smiled. They'd done it. They'd actually pulled off something that everyone said was impossible, transforming a criminal organization into a legitimate business empire. Her doorbell rang. When she answered, she found Lila standing there with Grace, who was now 8 years old and looked so much like Dominic it was almost painful. I hope it's okay that we stopped by, Lila said. Grace wanted to thank you for the birthday present. It's fine. Come in. Grace handed her a drawing, a child's rendering of a house with flowers and a family standing in front. This is for you, to say thank you. It's beautiful, Serena said. What's the family in the picture? It's me and Mom, and you. Because Mom says you're family too. Serena looked at Lila, who shrugged. She asked about her father last year. I told her the truth, that he made mistakes and had to go away. But I also told her that sometimes family isn't just blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to take care of you. I don't know if I qualify as family. You kept us safe when no one else would. You gave us a chance to start over. That qualifies. They stayed for dinner, the three of them eating pizza and talking about normal things, school, friends, the latest animated movie. It was ordinary and domestic in a way Serena had never experienced. After they left, she looked at Grace's drawing for a long time. Then she put it on her refrigerator, the first personal item that had occupied that space in years. 10 years after taking her seat on the council, Serena called a final meeting. They met at the original restaurant where they'd first voted to give her control, a decision that had changed all of their lives. I'm stepping down, she announced. The room erupted in protests and questions. Let me finish, Serena said. I'm stepping down because the job is done. We're completely legitimate now. We don't need a council to manage criminal operations. We need a board of directors to manage business interests, which means this organization, as it existed, is obsolete. That you want to dissolve the council? Victor asked. I want to transform it into something that reflects what we've actually become. A group of business leaders with shared investments and mutual interests. Marco nodded slowly. She's right. We're not criminals anymore. We're just rich people with complicated pasts. And that's what you want? Sullivan asked Serena. To become boring? I want to become something that lasts beyond us. Something we can be proud of instead of something we have to hide. The vote to dissolve the council and reform as a legitimate business consortium was unanimous. They drafted articles of incorporation, filed paperwork with the state, and formally established themselves as the Chicago Strategic Investment Group. It was boring, corporate, completely legitimate. It was also the culmination of everything Serena had been working toward for a decade. On the day the papers were finalized, she drove to the cemetery where her father was buried. She hadn't visited his grave in years, had been too busy destroying and rebuilding to think about the man who'd started her on this path. She stood at his headstone and told him everything, about Dominic, about the council, about the transformation she'd orchestrated. She told him about Grace and Jennifer and the empire that would outlast all of them. I don't know if you'd be proud of me, she said to the granite marker, but I'm proud of what we built, and that's enough. She walked back to her car, got in, and drove toward whatever came next. The past was behind her, the betrayals, the manipulations, the careful destruction of everything Dominic had been. And the future was unwritten, full of possibilities she was finally free to explore. For the first time in years, Serena felt something she barely recognized. Not victory or vindication or the hollow satisfaction of revenge, just peace. She'd started this journey as a woman who'd been betrayed, who discovered her husband's ultimate treachery in the form of 3 words on a phone screen. She'd responded not with rage but with strategy, not with violence but with precision. And in the end, she hadn't destroyed Dominic with a bullet or a blade. She'd erased him through patience, through planning, through becoming something he could never comprehend. She'd become free. Serena drove through Chicago, the city that had been her kingdom and her cage, and allowed herself a small smile. Somewhere out there, Dominic was dead. His legacy was dust. His empire had been transformed into something he wouldn't recognize. And his ex-wife sat at the helm of a legitimate business empire worth hundreds of millions, surrounded by people she'd chosen, building something that would last generations. The queen had won, not by destroying the king, but by making him irrelevant. And that, Serena thought, was the sweetest victory of all.